Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of What If Naruto Became Heir to the Demon of Kirigakure. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe as it inspires me to make more such videos. Also check out my other playlist, hope you would like them too. So let's get started. Chapter 4, The Forest of Death. Blue eyes examined bronzed hands as they turned and clenched into fists. Birds chirped outside the window, their songs a pleasant sound to wake to on a morning such as this. Today was the start of the second exam. The Forest of Death. Naruto rolled the name around in his head. With a title like that, something tells me we won't be getting out of there without shedding at least a little blood. Just gotta be sure it's not ours. The blonde had already seen death. He stood there and watched as the life faded from Zabuza's eyes. And he'd watched men be killed when the Rouge ninja slaughtered Gato's thugs before carving into the man himself. But now there was a real possibility that he would be the one ending someone's life. And Naruto wasn't completely sure what to make of that. In his wanting to honor the fallen mist shinobi, he knew, in the back of his mind, that it meant taking on the deaths of others, but he had managed not to think about it too much since then. Being busy with training helped in that regard. But with the second stage of the Chunin exams staring him in the face, and it being held at a place with a name like Forest of Death, the blonde knew that he wasn't going to get through it without someone being on the business end of his sword. Was he ready for that? That's a stupid question, he berated himself. No one's ever ready for their first kill. Zabuza probably had to psych himself up big time before taking on that graduating class in Kiri. The man had killed over 100 trained students at the age of 9, and Naruto was just now worrying about killing his first opponent at the age of 13. The blonde shook his head. Oh, how times were different. But I've gotta do this, he said to himself, while getting up from his bed. I can't honor his memory if I chicken out when it counts, and besides, if I use the hidden mist jutsu he should be okay, right? Since I won't have to see it. Using that reasoning to anchor his resolve, Naruto walked over to the door, slid Kubai Kiriboko in its place along his back before exiting his apartment. He had an exam to pass, and he wasn't gonna get there in time if he stayed here. Leaving his weights at home again, it didn't take the fledgling killer very long to arrive at his intended destination. Within minutes of speeding over rooftops, the blonde found himself standing atop the edge of a mid-level apartment complex overlooking the Forest of Death. Looks like I wasn't the only one who decided to leave early. Indeed, there were numerous teams already standing around the gated training ground, with more coming up from the roads. Blue eyes scanned the crowd until they settled on a pair standing off to the side, one with a head of raven black hair, the other's a vibrant pink. Naruto vanished from the rooftop, then reappeared on the ground before striding over to his teammates. Sasuke was the first to see him. Remembering what happened yesterday, the Uchiha gave his blonde comrade a heated glare, which Naruto readily ignored. Sakura, seeing her crush's enhanced bad mood, looked around to find what had upset him, so when her eyes landed on Naruto she sighed. Can't you two go one day without acting this way? Naruto, whatever you did to Sasuke-kun, can you just apologize before the second exam starts? This made the accused blonde scoff. There's nothing for me to apologize for, Sakura. Besides, the Tem knows better than to get distracted when it counts. We'll be fine. Yeah, but I'd rather not have to play referee while you two butt heads with each other, Sakura groaned internally. However, before anything more could be said, Anko called out to the teams and instructed them to converge near her. I guess since all the teams are here a little early there's no point in putting off the test, Sasuke observed. Then, motioning his teammates, he began to skulk over towards the examiner. Instead of trying to walk beside her raven-haired love, Sakura decided to hold back and walk beside the other male on her team. She wanted answers, and her best bet was to ask the blonde. Naruto, what happened yesterday? Sasuke-kun was more angry than normal when I showed up at the testing area. What did you do? Sakura, I already told you, it's not important. All that matters right now is passing the second exam. The Tem knows that too, so just let it go for now. You can wipe the little baby's nose later, ouch. Naruto's gruff response was cut short by his pink-haired teammate slamming her fist into the crown of his head. The young kunoichi gave the boy an angry look, growling as she spoke. Don't talk about Sasuke-kun like that, you idiot. That's probably the reason he's so upset. because of that smart mouth of yours. You know, I wouldn't recommend beating up your teammate before this exam, girly. You're gonna need all the help you can get just to survive it. Hearing the voice behind her made Sakura jump. Whipping around, kunai in hand, she came face to face with the proctor, Anko. The purple-haired woman grabbed hold of the younger Kunoichi's wrist and wagged her free finger in scolding manner. And I definitely wouldn't recommend whipping one of these out on me, it might just get you killed. Sakura, a little shaken up from the unexpected encounter, stuttered a response. Well, it's not like we need Naruto Baka to help us get through the test anyway, he's the weakest member. Anko stood to her full height, forcing the pink-haired girl to look up as she gave her retort. Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that, from what I can tell, he's stronger than the both of you put together. But, you did bring up one of the rules for the test, so let me get back to my explanation. With that, the woman vanished in a burst of speed and reappeared back before the fence. Alright, listen up. The second phase of the Chunin exams will consist of a 5-day survival test, mixed with capture the flag. Each team will be given one scroll, either a heaven or an earth, and will be required to obtain the other scroll by taking one that belongs to another team. This way at least half of the teams will be cut from the exams. What? Choji Akimishi cried in despair. 5 days? What am I supposed to do for food? Anko just stared at the overweight boy in surprise. Even she could go 5 days without food. Well, it is a forest, so just find some of the edible plants or a river with some fish. You'll be fine. The plump Jonin sagged his shoulder at the thought of eating plants. Shikamaru groaned and threw his hand up. When Anko motioned him to speak, the boy asked about giving up. There is no giving up, she replied matter-of-factually. Che, you think in the middle of a battle you can just throw down your weapon and say sorry I quit? She thought about it a moment, giggled sadistically, and continued, well, I guess you could, but it'd probably get you killed. Shikamaru hung his head in response to her answer and grumbled about what a drag the test was gonna be. Now, Anko returned to the rules. Your goal is going to be to obtain one of each scroll, and then bring them to the central tower, which is about 6 miles from any one starting gate. But then why are we being given 5 days if it's only 6 miles from the start? Ino wondered out loud. To her it didn't really make sense, she could run that in less than a day. Because you'll be dealing with the dangerous wildlife and plant life in the forest alongside the threat of other teams, little lady. 5 days may seem like a long time, but trust me when I tell you, they'll go by in the blink of an eye if you aren't careful. Seeing that the platinum blonde was done asking questions, Anko returned to her rules. Finally, there is more than one way to fail this test. Number 1 is obvious, if you are unable to obtain both scrolls within the time limit. 2, even if you have both, but fail to make it to the tower in time. 3, if only 2 members of your squad make it to the tower. And 4, if you look inside the scroll at any time during the test. Kiba raised his hand, but what if one of the scrolls just kinda rolls open and you take a peek? Let's just put it this way, kid, you don't wanna know, the special Jonin grinned. During a mission when you're asked to transport important documents, you're never allowed to look inside. So why should now be any different? Seeing that everyone seemed to understand the test now, Anko pulled a stack of paperwork from her trench coat and handed them to Naruto. Here, kid. Pass these out to the other brats, and then take one for yourself. She turned to address the crowd in front of her. What's being handed out are consent forms, you can't take the second exam without filling one out. People may die during the test and Konoha needs to know that you all are okay with that. Once you've finished, take it to the stand over there, trade it for a scroll, and then get set up next to an entrance. After handing out the forms, Naruto walked away from his team and read over the paper he was required to fill out. It was pretty standard stuff as far as he could tell, and it made sense to have them hand one in. After all, the Leaf can't have another village claiming their ninja were being picked off unfairly, now can they? A quiet mumbling caught the bandaged blonde's attention. Looking up, his eyes were met with Hinata standing underneath a tree. She looked to be mulling over whether she should sign the form or not. You know, he called out as he walked up to the young heiress. You and your team kinda have an unfair advantage, Hinata-san. The girl in question jumped a little before turning to see who had addressed her. Hinata's cheeks pinked when she saw that it was Naruto who was speaking to her. Then what he'd said finally registered and she stammered out a quiet response. What makes you say that, Naruto? Well, your team specializes in tracking and recon, right? When the shy Kunoichi nodded, he continued, that means you guys must do survival drill a lot. Plus with your Bakugan, there's no way you guys are gonna get caught off guard. I know I wouldn't wanna fight you, Hinata-san. Why you wouldn't? Naruto chuckled lightly at her surprised look. Of course not, you're definitely one of the strongest kunoichi out here, probably the strongest after that crazy chick from Suna. I don't know if I'd survive a fight with someone so strong. The way the girl's face filled with color and her lips curled into a bashful smile, Naruto knew he'd hit his mark. She would compete and she'd do just fine. Turning around so as to get back to his team, the blonde threw up his hand and said his goodbyes. Wait, and Naruto. He stopped and looked back in confusion. Hinata was nervously fiddling with something in her small hands. Walking closer, Naruto asked, "What is it, Hinata-san?" Hinata held out her hands and blue eyes inspected the item they held. It was a small brown jar. It's medicine, in case you get hurt during the exam. I made it myself. Naruto looked at the dark-haired girl in shock. She was willing to help him during an exam that decided who would become a Chunin, and who stayed a genin for another 6 months. Hinata-san, I don't think I can accept this. I mean, what about your own team? Hinata shook her head and made a dismissive hum. Kiba and Shino already have one, and I always keep one in my weapon pouch just in case. I made this one. For you. The blonde was thrown for a loop. She'd made an extra just for him. Thank you. Hinata. Nobody has ever done something like this for me before. I don't really know what to say. The young heiress just shook her head again and quietly replied, why, you don't have to say anything, Naruto. I just. Well. Hey, Naruto Baka, hurry up and get over here. We need your consent form to get a scroll, you know. Sakura's loud voice interrupted them. Hinata jumped in surprise, while Naruto let out a small groan. I'm sorry, Hinata, he apologized. Maybe we can talk after the second exam is over, and there won't be any annoying interruptions. With that, he waved goodbye again and headed off to join his squad. Back by the tree, Hinata smiled while her lavender eyes dropped down shyly. He stopped calling me Hinata-san. XXX. Squad 7 stood at the gate they'd chosen to begin the second exam at. Naruto, having slipped the jar Hinata had given him into his weapon pouch for safekeeping. I think it'd be best if I held the scroll, you guys. Sasuke and Sakura turned to him, looks of disbelief on their faces. Are you kidding, Dope? You're probably the first person they'll go after. Why would we give it to you? Well, even if that is true, which it's not, we could use that against them, right? They wouldn't expect you to hand over the scroll to one of us, Sasuke, so they'd all think you had it. The blonde's logic made sense, but the Uchiha wasn't having it. No, we can't afford to place the scroll at risk. I'll hold on to it for now, and then once we get the Heaven Scroll you can carry that one. Naruto just sighed and crossed his arms. If this was how they were gonna be, chances were, someone was gonna get seriously hurt soon. Sakura, who hadn't bothered to comment on the blonde's crazy plan, chose instead to question him on another matter. So Naruto, what were you and Hinata-san talking about when I found you? You guys were pretty close, was I interrupting something? Hinata just seemed a little unsure of herself, Sakura, so I decided I'd give her a little pep talk, that's all. You should have left her alone, Sasuke butted in. If she had gotten scared then she would have dropped out, and then Kiba and Shino would have had to as well, leaving us with that much less competition, Dope. Naruto's brow scrunched in annoyance, and he shot his teammate a slight glare. What are you so worried about, Tem? They're leaf shinobi like us, chances are they won't even try to attack one of their own. Besides, just because your heart's cold and black doesn't mean mine has to be. This seemed to strike a nerve with the Uchiha, because like the day before his body tensed in preparation for action. But before he could do, or say anything, the speakers above their gate came to life. Alright you maggots, it's time for the second phase of the Chunin exams to begin. With that, The Chunin behind the gate unlocked the padlock that kept it closed. But before you little brats head out, I've got one more piece of advice for you all. Just don't die. From there all the gates were thrown open and many of the teams shot off into the darkness of the forest. Team 7 on the other hand simply walked through. XXX. Why are we just walking around like this? Naruto complained as he and his team continued their light walking pace through the forest of death. We've been walking for over an hour, and we haven't come across a single team. What the heck are we waiting for? While he'd accepted the fact that he may have to kill during the exam, it didn't mean the young blonde was in any hurry to do so. If anything, Naruto wanted to find a heaven scroll and get to the tower fast, before something bad happened. Something in this forest just didn't feel right to him. Would you stop complaining already, Naruto? Sakura replied in an annoyed tone. Sasuke-kun already explained it to you. We're moving like this so that we don't get caught off guard by any traps in the trees. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the pink-haired girl, but said nothing. Telling them about his feeling wouldn't do any good. It'd probably just provoke the Tem into going slower, so he could call out the threat for a fight. So instead, the blonde turned his senses outward to try and be ready for any signs of ambush. It paid off. After another half hour of walking, Naruto's nose picked up the scent of something foreign. They were being watched. It was a far cry from any of the scents his fellow leaf ninja carried. He'd been around them all long enough to know, and it didn't match anything he'd smelled in the forest so far. This led the blonde to believe that it was an enemy ninja. Using a technique they'd been taught in the academy, Naruto channeled chakra to his ears and increased his hearing. His nose had always been a little more sensitive than most people's, and his ears were sharp from his days of playing pranks, but he was no Inuzuka. He'd need the boost. With the increase in hearing, Naruto managed to hear the enemy's breathing. It was unusual. He must have some sort of mouthpiece on. His breaths are all followed by a strange static-like noise. I'm lucky too, the idiot got close a little further back, and I wouldn't have noticed him. Naruto continued walking behind his fellow members of Team 7, his mind whirling, trying to come up with a way to draw out the stalker and take him out without giving him chance to escape. He walked for a few more minutes, making sure to keep his senses trained on the enemy ninja, before an idea came to him, but the blonde really wished he could have come up with a better tactic. I have got to start spending more time with Shikamaru. This idea will probably work, but it's way too lame to ever mention later. With his plan set, Naruto called out to his team. Hey guys, hold up, I gotta go to the bathroom. The two ahead of him looked back, Sasuke with a frustrated scowl and Sakura a grossed out look. What the? Are you serious, Naruto baka? Why didn't you go before you left home? Hey, the blonde cried indignantly. It's not my fault, okay? How was I supposed to know we'd be doing survival exercises for the second exam? Well, still minus. Sakura, enough, Sasuke interrupted. The longer you argue with the idiot, the more time we waste. Just let him go. The Uchiha stepped over to one of the nearby trees and sat down, motioning for his blonde teammate to go do his business. Naruto nodded in thanks to his raven-haired teammate before he walked off into the trees on the other side. He made sure to walk a good ways, so as to give the stalker a higher sense of security, before stopping and making like he was undoing his belt. The entire time he made his little side journey, the bandaged blonde kept his senses trained on the guy in the trees. He silently patted himself on the back when he noticed the guy was following him. This may just be easier than he thought. It wasn't more than a minute before Naruto heard the guy drop down behind him. He felt the cold steel of a kunai press against his neck, and then heard a raspy voice in his ear. Don't you know it's not safe to walk around strange places by yourself? Never know what kind of bad guys are out there waiting in the shadows. Instead of panicking, Naruto just laughed a little. This seemed to annoy the enemy ninja because he growled, "Why are you laughing, punk? Don't you realize that this is the end?" I'm sorry, it's just that's gotta be one of the worst lines I've ever heard. And I used to say some pretty lame things, so I'd know. Well, the ninja replied, I hope it was funny enough, because it's the last thing you'll ever hear. With that, he whipped his kunai across Naruto's throat, and stepped back to watch as the body fell down into a puddle of blood. Ha! The Jonin laughed. I knew that kid was all talk, gray. Oboro didn't have long to gloat though. Faster than he could comprehend, an arm wrapped around his throat, and a kunai was shoved through the back of his neck. The move severed his spinal cord, ending his life instantly. Because of this quick death, the young brunette didn't have the chance to see the body at his feet puff away into smoke, revealing itself to be a shadow clone. Behind him, the real Naruto stood with his weapon hilt deep in the boy's neck. Once he was sure he'd done it right, Naruto yanked his knife free and let the Ame Genin's body drop unceremoniously to the ground. With bile rising fast in his throat, the blonde forced himself to look at the dead body. Naruto wanted it to register in his mind that he had done this, and that he'd be doing it again. The Uzumaki boy looked over his first kill. As he hunched over to throw up, Naruto thought about what he'd seen. He saw blood stain the collar of the Ame Genin's jumpsuit, turning the pale yellow a dark, muddy crimson. There was a lot less blood than he'd originally expected. He'd created and switched with a clone while walking towards his designated tree and then stalked up behind the older-looking boy to make the kill. Must be what makes it such an ideal assassination spot. But this actually helped a little. Naruto had been expecting his first kill to be messy and to be covered in blood, but instead only a small backsplash had caught the knuckles of his killing hand. Looking over the guy again, the bandaged blonde noticed the look in his eyes. Shock. For a single second the Ame Genin had known Naruto was there and had been surprised. Now his eyes would forever remain wide and glassy with that look. But the fact that his enemy had known he was there at all made Naruto realize that his silent killing needed work. A lot of work, he thought grudgingly. There's no way it'll work on any self-respecting chunin, never mind jounin. Even with the mist, if I don't practice more with my technique, I'll be an embarrassment to my title. Cleaning off his kunai, Naruto placed it back in its holster with the others, and then knelt down to check if the guy had a scroll. No dice. He must have been sent out as a scout, Naruto mumbled to himself. Either that, or he was impatient, and wanted to start picking people off, so he parted from his team. With his skill level, I'd bet even Choji could beat him. Having no luck with finishing up the second exam quickly, Naruto got back to his feet and started to make his way back to the others. No point in giving the guy a burial, not like he'd do the same or me. It didn't take the blonde long to make it back. But once he did, Naruto refrained from telling them about what happened, and just motioned that he was ready to go. That's still so gross, Sakura shuddered. Until we find a river, or get to the tower, stay away from me. I don't want you touching me with those hands. While he didn't stop, Naruto's breath hitched for a moment. What? He looked over at his pink-haired teammate, expecting to see some form of unholy disgust, but instead was met with a face that resembled a girl who thought boys were icky. Oh, that's right, she thinks I used the bathroom. Sakura didn't actually see what I did. With his fears put to rest, Naruto started to turn his attention back to the forest around him. But first, the blonde let his gaze linger for a moment, and he replied, "Sure thing, Sakura. And when we get attacked by enemy ninja, I'll be sure not to come save you, you know, with my dirty hands and all." From there the team was quiet. Although Sakura looked over at the blonde in befuddlement, he wouldn't save her. The same kid, who'd swear up and down that he'd do anything for her, wouldn't come to her aid if she were in danger. Yeah, right, she thought with a snort. The because probably just trying to get my attention, but it won't work. Cha. That little knucklehead, who does he think he is, Sasuke-kun? If he thinks acting all cool's gonna make us go out with him, he's crazy, Sakura's inner voice agreed. But as they moved farther and farther into the forest, Team 7 was unaware of just what kind of danger awaited them. Outside the testing grounds, seated atop the stand where the teams received their scrolls, Enko Mitarashi was having her lunch. She'd made a quick dash to her favorite dumpling stand, and then returned so as to not miss any of the fun sounds that echoed through the forest of death. Anelh. Like a team of genin getting caught in a trap, she thought with a sadistic smirk. After sliding another dango off its skewer, the purple-haired Kunoichi went to take a drink from her can, though her mind soon started to drift. Its main focus, the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. She'd only really met him twice, that time in the store, and then again in the library. But she'd found the blonde to be an interesting character. He'd even managed to keep up with her humor, something not many people could take claim to. One thing's for sure, he's definitely one of the few that'll survive the forest. That kid's no ordinary genin. As she was about to slide the last dumpling off the skewer, Anko was joined by two chunin. "What's the matter?" she muttered through a mouthful of food. "Why are you bothering me?" A lower-ranked shinobi, one with glasses and a flak jacket, bowed in response. "We're sorry, Mitarashi-san, but we've discovered something that we think you should see." "And what would that be?" "It must be pretty important for you to willingly interrupt my lunch." "It is, ma'am," chimed the other chunin. Well, it's a highly unusual case, and we believe you are the best suited to assess the situation." "Unusual, huh?" Anko hopped down from her perch, the dango skewer resting between her teeth. "Alright then," she eyed the two men with curiosity, "show me what's got you guys so nervous." In a trio of shunshin, the three ninja were gone. When they stopped, Anko saw that she'd been taken to a small prayer field. There were small statues of deities circling a stone platform. And on that platform was the reason she'd been called. 3 dead bodies. It was obviously a messy ending, as the area was splattered with blood. But what Anko couldn't figure out is who had done it and why. "Alright," she turned to the chunin with glasses, "so what do you know about what happened here?" The chunin handed his superior the ninja IDs of the dead shinobi and explained what he knew. "We were patrolling the area, as per Lord Hokage's orders, when we came upon the scene. They were already dead, and we have no clues as to who committed the act, but there was one thing that we couldn't make heads or tails of. And why we came and got you." As she looked through the wallets of the now identified Kaibusa genin, Anko continued her questioning. "Right, you mentioned something about this particular case being unusual, so what was it?" Well, Mitarashi-san, the victims' faces have been torn off." This piece of news immediately got Anko's attention. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end and her body tensed in fear as an image. A memory began to play back in her mind. No. It can't be. What would he be doing here? Why now? Turning to the chunin she had spoken with, the special jounin began to issue orders. "I want you to inform Lord Hokage of this immediately. Tell him to send a squad of Anbi units into the Forest of Death. He'll understand why." "But ma'am, what about you minus?" "I'm going in alone," she cut him off. "We need to respond quickly if we want any chance of capturing the one who did this, but I can't beat him alone, so I need those Anbu." Anko reached over and grabbed the chunin by his flak jacket, "Which I won't get in time if you sit around here asking stupid questions, so get going." Stuttering an apology, the chunin made a hasty exit towards the Hokage's office, leaving Anko alone with his partner. "Mitarashi-san, I'm new to my rank, so I don't understand all this. What's going on?" But the purple-haired Kunoichi didn't respond. She reached up to cup her neck, eyes burning with rage, and then she was gone. "You. What could you possibly be doing here after all these years?" XXX. While the special jounin rushed in to combat a dangerous threat to the village, Naruto was busy facing off against enemies of his own. He and his team had made it another half a mile in when they were attacked, this time by a full team and out in the open. It was a genin squad from Suna this time. I'm just glad it wasn't Gaara's team. This one was an all-male squad. Each one wore sleeveless muscle shirts of different colors, and white pants that were taped at the ankles. One in particular caught the Uzumaki's attention. The guy stood at an average height, and had a head of dirty blonde hair. But it was the weapon he wielded that got Naruto's attention. He had a large club gripped in his hand. It wasn't so big that it looked odd in the older boy's hand, but the bandaged blonde could tell that it was heavy by the way the Suna genin's arm was tensed. There were also spikes protruding from various spots around the hunk of metal. Well, what have he here?" the club wielder jibed. "Looks like we found 3 little leaf rodents to kill, right guys?" "You bet, Ranmaru," laughed a Suna genin with raven black hair and shades. "It's too bad for them," agreed the FINL member of the squad. He had green hair and a pale complexion. "They just look like a bunch of greenhorns, and already they're gonna die." The two on the ends broke out into an annoying chorus of laughter. But as Naruto tensed his muscles, The club wielder looked his way, and the older boy's eyes hardened. Quiet. Both Sunagakure stopped laughing immediately. So I was right, the blonde confirmed. He is the leader. But before Naruto could think of how to respond to the situation, Sasuke beat him to it. Before this goes any further, why don't you tell us what scroll you have? A cocky smirk etched its way onto the Uka's face as he continued speaking. I'd rather not waste time beating you guys to a pulp if it's not gonna get me what I want. Naruto resisted the urge to strangle his teammate. What was he doing? Ranmari, the genin that Naruto kept his eyes on, pulled his team scroll from his supply pouch. It was a heaven scroll. The one Team 7 needed to pass. Which means they had the scroll the Suna team needed too. A fight was unavoidable. Sasuke realized this too, although he looked at it as an opportunity to beat down a team of foreign ninja and showcase his Uchiha power. Well now, that's too bad for you, the three of you. Because you see, that's the scroll we need, and now that I know which one of you has it. Sasuke vanished. Or at least, that's what it looked like to Sakura and the Sunagakure. But to Naruto and Ranmari, the Uchiha may as well have been jogging. When Sasuke reappeared above him, Ranmaru was more than ready. The Sunagakure jumped back and easily avoided the raven-haired boy's aerial attack. But it seems Sasuke would not be outdone, as he immediately rushed forward and attempted to connect with a combo of punches. Ranmaru ducked and weaved around each of the blows that his opponent threw at him. After ducking under one right hook in particular though, the older boy decided to throw up his hand and catch the roundhouse that came behind it. From there, he simply shoved the raven-haired kid to the ground. Sasuke managed to catch himself with the palms of his hands and flipped back towards his team. The guy hadn't even been trying, and he'd avoided every strike. How could that be? But before Sasuke could think of a new attack plan, the Sunagakure called out to him. Don't bother, it's not you, I'm interested in Kid. I wanna fight the blonde one. I'd like to know if that sword's just for show, or if he's actually got what it takes to swing it. This angered the Uchiha. He was being dismissed for Naruto of all people. It was insulting. This guy just doesn't realize who he's messing with. With that, Sasuke activated his clan's dojutsu and sent another snide grin at the club wielder. What, afraid that now that I know your moves I'll pound you with my Sharingan? Ranmaru laughed. Ha! Fancy eyes aren't gonna save you here, kid, and besides, I already told you. You don't interest me. I prefer to fight opponents who wield weapons, not just jutsu. It shows they have real skill. The dirty blonde looked over at Naruto and offered, so how about Kid? Naruto's response was to begin activating his mist. This shocked the three Sunagakure, as well as the remaining members of Team 7. As the surrounding area began to fill with mist, Ranmaru called out to the disappearing blonde, "What's a leaf ninja doing using a Kiri technique?" By the time his fellow blonde was done speaking, Naruto had vanished from sight. Not even his own team could see him. Naruto swiftly made his way up into the trees and from there created two clones. Using hand signals that they'd practiced over the month before the exams, Naruto instructed his doppelgangers on what to do. This guy was definitely more skilled than that rain ninja, so he'd need to be a little smarter. Down below, Sasuke and Sakura were back to back, cursing their blonde teammate for not letting them in on his plan. How were they supposed to fight in this mist? And how did he even manage to do it? Sakura wondered wordlessly as she surveyed her surroundings. There was never any immediate water source. How had he created the mist? That creep Zabuza used the river, but Naruto just seemed to make it appear out of nowhere. But she didn't get to think about it for too long, because her eyes made out the hazy shape of a person to her left. As they drew closer, she realized it was the green-haired Sunagakure, and he was looking right at her. So Ranmaru was right, you three aren't big on teamwork, it seems. He rushed forward, but instead of locking weapons with Sakura, he wound up clashing with Sasuke. The two had turned, with the pink-haired Kunoichi covering his blind spots. Just because the dope doesn't let us in on his little plan, Sasuke countered, doesn't mean we were never taught how to work together. The Uchiha pushed away his opponent's kunai and threw out a jab. It connected, and sent the Sunagakure staggering back. Taking this chance, Sasuke reached back to wrap an arm around Sakura's waist, and then leapt away back into the mist. While Sasuke and Sakura dealt with his teammates, Ranmaru was busy keeping up his guard in preparation for the third member of Team 7's opening attack. "You know," he goaded, "here I thought you were different. But it turns out you're just like all the other wannabe losers that make up the ninja world." He was met with silence. And then he was dodging shuriken as they sailed towards him from the right. His eyes scouring the mist, Ranmaru called out again, "What kind of attack was that, huh? All this hiding, and for what? Eventually you'll have to face me like a man." The dirty blonde heard the shifting of the ground behind him and whirled around to attack his opponent with his club. "Ha! Got you." Spiked steel cut through air as Naruto ducked under the swing. The bandaged blonde pulled Kubai Kiriboko from its place on his back and gave his own mighty swing. However, using only one arm, the blade cleaved too slow and Ranmaru managed to avoid serious injury, escaping with only a slight gash across his chest. As Ranmaru regained his footing and readied himself for another attack, he was forced to stop and block an aerial strike from above. Throwing up his club, the Sunagakure managed to stop a second Naruto from hacking off his arm. But this left him open to the blonde that stood in front of him. However, instead of running him through, that Naruto used his sword as a springboard and planted his feet dead center into Ranmaru's unguarded chest. This sent the dirty blonde sailing back, but he managed not to topple to the ground. But when he looked around, his enemy was once again nowhere in sight. This kid. He's something else. He's figured out how to make solid clones, but did he just copy Kiri's water clone jutsu, or is this something else? Well, no point in making it too easy for him. With that, Ranmaru began to concentrate his chakra, molding it so as to have enough. Then, he buried his club into the ground and began a series of hand signs, before finally stopping and calling out his attack. Wind style, gale force breath. The Sunagakure lifted his head into the air and let out a heavy exhale. His attack rushed out and Ranmaru aimed his head in all directions, the force beginning to dissipate the surrounding mist. Unfortunately, the dirty blonde was still only a genin, and so did not have a very high reserve of chakra. With a minute of using the C-ranked ninjutsu, he was at 50% of his max. Knowing that any further use of the technique would hinder his fighting ability, Ranmaru capped off his technique, but when he looked around, his temples throbbed with anger. The mist was returning. "It's as if I never even did the attack, damn it all. I wasted all that chakra for nothing then." Looking around wildly, Ranmaru began to lose his cool. "You must think you're real funny, huh, kid? Think you've got me beat, just because of this little trick? Well, think again. I'm one of the best genin my village has to offer, and there's no way I'm gonna lose to a snot-nosed little punk like you." When his rant was only met with more silence, the furious Suna ninja wrenched his club from out of the ground and began to swing it wildly. "Rya! Come out and fight me like a man. What kind of weakling hides in the face of a fight? You call yourself a warrior?" This time, the older boy's angry words were met with a response. Laughter. Laughter rang out all around him. But it wasn't the kind of laughter one would give off from a funny joke. No, this was one of mockery. As if the person watching thought Ranmaru was just a big, dumb idiot. It drove the Sand Genin wild. "Gror, where are you minus?" The rest of the rant went unspoken. Ranmaru's head having been cleaved from his shoulders. Once the Suna shinobi was silenced, the mist began to evaporate, and the forest area became clear again. And as the air cleared, it revealed the headless body of Ranmaru with his head sitting a few feet away and Naruto walking over so as to retrieve his thrown sword. The blonde pulled Kubai Kiriboko from its earthy sheath and replaced it along his back. Finally, he looked down at the second body he dropped that day and answered, "I'm right here." A rustling in the bushes drew the Uzumaki's attention, and he swiftly placed a hand on his sword's handle and glared as he watched his teammates step out of them. "Stop. Before you come any closer, prove that you're not an enemy using a henge." "And how do you want us to do that?" Sasuke questioned. "Tell me something only you guys could, a memory from the academy." Sasuke made a disgusted face as he answered, "You got in my face the day we were assigned teams, and some idiot knocked into you, so we kissed." Naruto developed a tic, but nodded in acceptance. Then, turning towards Sakura, he motioned for her to reveal her memory. You chose Sasuke to be your very first sparring partner and lost. In 5 seconds. The smug tone she used to relay the account irked Naruto, but instead of flying off the handle, he just scoffed. And yet, I'm the one who defeat Ranmaru. Funny how that works, huh? This drew his teammates' eyes to the body on the ground. Sakura paled, while Sasuke simply wrinkled his nose, but Naruto could see the anger in his eyes too. He could see the jealousy. Sakura quickly turned her emerald eyes away from the grisly sight, and sent them narrowing at her teammate. What in the world, Naruto baka? You couldn't beat him, so you had to kill him. Blue eyes narrowed in annoyance as the accused blonde replied, Sakura, what's your problem? We're ninja, killing is in the job description, remember. If I hadn't killed him, he'd just become a threat later on down the road, or killed me right now. I don't know about you, but I prefer living over having my brains spattered across the ground any day. But Sakura wasn't convinced. Yeah, well, Sasuke-kun beat both of the other Tsunagenin without killing them, so why couldn't you? This brought Naruto's attention to Sasuke's less than sparkling appearance, and the blonde could only snort mockingly as he looked upon the elite Uchiha. Sasuke was dirty, and his shirt had multiple tears in it from barely avoided attacks, mostly from his blind spot. Looks like the Sharingan needs to take a lesson from the Byakugan about being able to see 360 degrees. Sakura, why are you so worried about what I'm doing? Why don't you just keep your head focused on what's really important, like passing the exam, instead of questioning my methods? As he spoke, Naruto had moved over to Ranmaru's dead body and began rummaging through the pouch he'd seen the older boy place his scroll in. Sure enough, Naruto came away with a heaven scroll, and a few weapons to replace the ones he'd thrown. Turning to look at his team, Naruto purposed that they make their way to the tower. I'm starting to get a little hungry. Begrudgingly, the other members of Squad 7 began to follow the blonde's lead as he began to walk off. Unfortunately, none of them noticed the pair of eyes that gazed down hungrily upon them. Soon Sasuke Uchiha, soon those wonderful eyes of yours are going to be mine. XXX. The first night had fallen in the forest of death. For some teams, like Konoha squads 8 and 9, it wasn't a problem because they had the Byakugan to pierce the black. But for others like Naruto's, it meant they had to hunker down and wait out the darkness. But at least we have both scrolls already, Sakura confirmed as she settled down on her branch next to Sasuke. So tomorrow, we can just head straight for the tower. Naruto, who sat a tree away, growled a little at his teammates' carelessness. Great, Sakura, just go right ahead and paint a big red target on the team's back. For a moment it looked like Sakura was going to argue, but Sasuke didn't feel like listening to them, so he spoke up instead. Sakura, as much as I hate saying this, the doe bit right. You shouldn't just say that out loud, it could draw unneeded attention. Funny, Naruto scoffed, and here I thought you'd still be itching for a fight. What happened, Ranmaru? Take all the wind out of your sails. His teammates' jibe caused Sasuke to tense in anger. No, I just don't feel like taking any dumb risks. Besides, Sasuke turned his head in a dismissive manner, you saw how that weakling chickened out after seeing my Sharingan. Naruto resisted the urge to roll his eyes, instead choosing to scoff again. Yeah, right. Naruto, leave Sasuke-kun alone, Sakura butted in, he's had a hard day. In fact, we all have, so do us a favor and don't start anything. The blonde's reaction was one that the Haruo girl never would have expected. He glared at her. Naruto's eyes turned a dark cobalt blue as he replied to her, reprimanding. You're one to talk, Sakura, you endanger the team by not thinking before you speak, but somehow I'm the one who needs to watch what I say. Look, just because I used to like you, don't think I'm gonna keep putting up with your attitude, those days are over. And with that, Naruto rested his head against his tree and closed his eyes. As the trio of genin rested from their long day, somewhere a few miles away from them, Anko was kicking herself in frustration. The special Jonin had spent hours searching for the faces she'd seen on those KUSAID cards, only to turn up empty-handed. Damn it all, if I don't find him soon, there's no telling what might happen. What a fine time for the law to kick in. Anko's request for backup in the form of an ambi detail had been denied. Since there was no hard proof that there was a rogue ninja inside the forest, The Hokage was barred from sending any in for fear that it was a ruse to just pick off other villages' genin. So much for trust and friendship between nations, she muttered while looking out into the dense woods. And I can't very well keep going on my own right now, even I don't want to try and deal with the monsters in these shadows. So instead, the purple-haired kunoichi knelt down and let some of the tension ease from her body, making sure to not completely let her guard down. It's gonna be a long night. XXX. When he opened his eyes again, Naruto wasn't greeted by the light of the sun, but by the sight of his other male teammate's face. What is it? You and I need to talk. Naruto's brow arched in confusion. About what? About Sakura and our team. The Uchiha looked over at the pink-haired girl in question. But I don't want her to wake up and overhear what we say, so we're gonna have to move away. That last bit caught the blonde's attention. But if we do that, Sakura will be a sitting duck. Sasuke. Even you aren't that heartless. Sasuke's face contorted into a frustrated look of thought. He stayed that way for a moment before voicing an idea. What if you leave a clone? That way, if anything happens, one of them can come find us. We won't be very far. Naruto stared at the raven-haired youth in front of him. His eyes bore into the onyx-black pair that stared back at him for what felt like hours, before finally Naruto relented. Alright, but only far enough so that she can't hear us. After making the clones, Naruto set off with his teammate and began moving away from Sakura. As promised, they didn't go very far and soon were standing along a branch far enough away that there wasn't any chance of being heard. But Naruto quickly noticed, he couldn't see Sakura either. He may not have feelings for her anymore, but she was still his teammate and he would prefer her not dying before they passed the second exam. Looking at Sasuke, the blonde asked, "Alright, we moved away, now what did you want to say, Sasuke? What do you think about having Sakura removed from the team?" Blue eyes widened as Naruto's bandaged mouth dropped open a little. What did you just say? Sasuke crossed his arms over his chest and elaborated, think about it. She's nothing but dead weight. When I was fighting those two Sunagakure, all Sakura did was stand there. And you saw how she reacted to you killing Ranmaru. I can't have a teammate that doesn't know how to be a shinobi. Naruto. So you want to have her pulled from Team 7? Naruto finished. And what do you think will happen to us, Tem? The Hokage's not just gonna send a 3-man squad out into the field, we'll have to wait for a replacement. Besides, knowing the old man, he won't do it. He'll just tell us to help her get stronger. The Uka's face set into an annoyed look. The waiting would be worth it, just to get that weakling off our team. Besides, I'm sure your grandfather would be more than willing to let us be a 3-man team considering how strong the both of us are. When Sasuke turned his eyes back to Naruto, he saw a look of smug satisfaction on the blonde's face. What? He asked carefully. Why are you looking at me like that? You know it's true. Naruto crossed his arms over his own chest and explained. You know, at first, you almost had me. You look just like him, even have all your holsters and pouches on the right way. But you tripped up with your speech. Sasuke would have immediately referred to me as a dobe after I called him a Tem. And besides, the real Sasuke knows that the Hokage isn't actually my grandfather. I just call him old man because, well, he's old. Oh, and Sasuke would rather cut out his tongue than admit that I'm strong. The now revealed imposter narrowed their eyes and settled into a defensive stance. With a cruel smirk he gave up the charade. Well, aren't you the observant one? It's too bad though. If you had just let me stall you until my master was finished, you would have been spared, but now I'm gonna have to kill you. Naruto's smug look melted away. But instead of fear, or surprise, it shaped into one of curiosity. Oh, he wondered, well, that'll be an interesting sight to see a dead man fighting. Sasuke's look-alike arched his brow in confusion. Had this kid lost his mind? But before he could say anything else, a weight dropped down on him and slammed him to the ground. A pair of kunai had been thrust into his shoulders. Struggling under the weight of a clone, the imposter's henge dropped away, revealing a rather rotund team wearing a straw hat and purple robes. Looking up, he asked in a nasally voice when Naruto had set up a shadow clone. Simple. When you were leading me away. With your back to me you didn't see me scratch my face, it's the sign my clones, and I decided would mean follow. Naruto chuckled mockingly, do you really think I'd just walk off with you without being tailed? The imposter growled menacingly in his throat, not liking being made a fool of, but then laughed himself before he bragged, and yet you still lose. My master has more than likely already achieved what he's come here to do, so my time was not wasted. Which means, in the end, I get the last laugh. From there he broke out into a wild, mocking fit of laughter, only to be silenced a moment later when Naruto's clone pulled out another kunai and jammed it into the back of his neck. The imposter was silenced instantly. You know, the doppelganger said as it stood up, there is more than one way to kill a person. By Zabuza's knowledge, there are 8. Naruto eyed his clone. I know, but I'd rather not have had to listen as he choked on his own blood. He was a pawn in someone else's game, not really a position befitting a ruthless death. But what he said, I should get back to the others. With a nod the clone dispelled in a puff of smoke, sending the chakra back to its creator who then proceeded to rush back the way he came. I've got a bad feeling about this. That bad feeling turned out to be well-founded. Because once the blonde returned to where he and his team had settled down, he immediately noticed one very bad thing. There was nobody there. Sasuke and Sakura were gone, and it didn't look like anyone had ever even. Wait, what was that? Naruto knelt down on the branch that Sasuke had picked to sleep on, squinted his ocean blue eyes, and saw something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Blood. There was a puddle of it oozing along the bark of the log. Shit, chances are that's Sasuke's blood. Problem is I don't know which way they even went. Staring back down at the blood, Naruto got an idea. But maybe. The blonde focused his chakra and sent it to his nose. His sense of smell skyrocketed, and he could pick up the scent of the blood in front of him as well as a faint trail that led off to the left. Snapping his head in that direction, Naruto quickly shot off from the branch and raced after his teammates. Just because he didn't like them, didn't mean he was willing to fail the exams by letting them die. XXX. Sasuke felt as if his heart was going to explode out of his chest, and his lungs burned from the heat of his latest great fireball jutsu. The opponent in front of him was unlike anything he'd ever faced before. The Uchiha didn't think even Rock Lee would stand a chance. Just who the hell is this lady, and what does she want from us? So far the raven-haired clan heir hadn't activated his Sharingan, but Sasuke was beginning to think that if he didn't do it soon that the fight wouldn't last much longer. The woman had appeared out of nowhere during Sakura's watch. Naruto had disappeared, and the pink-haired girl had been placed under a genjutsu. Sasuke was awakened by the immense evil that permeated the air as the Kusa Kunoichi stepped out from behind a tree. Sasuke had immediately woken Sakura from her forced slumber and asked about Naruto. Your little friend is far too powerful for his rank, she replied in a slick oily tone, and I didn't feel like trying to avoid him while having my fun with you, Sasuke Uchiha. From there it was a blur to the frightened remains of Squad 7. The lanky woman just looked at them, and Sasuke and Sakura were unable to move. It felt as if their entire bodies had been weighted down with lead. But that wasn't the worst of it. As they peered into the Kusa Kunoichi's eyes, both Gen and each witnessed their own gruesome demise at the evil woman's hands. It was bloody, it was sick, it was terrifying. Sakura, unable to handle such a grisly image, bent over and retched. As she emptied her stomach of its contents, Sasuke also noticed that she was shaking, convulsing, out of sheer horror at the thought of dying in such a way. Sasuke had turned his eyes away from her when he noticed the woman beginning to walk towards them, and air of pure death seeming to radiate from her very being. The Uchiha Avenger grit his teeth until they ached and finally managed to force himself to move, if only a little, so as to pull a kunai from his holster. After that, Sasuke plunged the blade into his own flesh, and with the genjutsu's hold broken, rush off with Sakura clutched in his arms. Unfortunately they didn't manage to get very far, and Sasuke was forced to do battle with the creepy Kunoichi. That's when he learned how much trouble he was truly in. I haven't been able to land a solid blow since we started, he seethed while keeping his eyes on the Kusa woman. She's so fast, and this wound in my leg isn't helping me to keep up with her. Suddenly a dark laughter filled the air, drawing Sasuke away from his thoughts and back to the battle. The Kusa Kunoichi was eyeing him with a predatory gleam in her soulless, black eyes. Now Sasuke, do you really think it's a good idea to let yourself be distracted by your thoughts? In fact, the only thought that should be on your mind is surviving, because I'm done warming up. That was just a warm-up. That was the only thought Sasuke managed to get out before he was kneed in the stomach. His opponent had just gotten faster. Sasuke was knocked off the tree he'd been perched on and sent sailing through the air. Years of training kicked in though, and the Uchiha managed to right himself in mid-air and land safely on another branch. As he looked up from his lowered position, the boy's eyes glowed red, this time with two tomi in each eye. This seemed to excite his opponent. Ah yes, the Sharingan. I was wondering when I'd get to see it. And it looks like I've pushed you just far enough to unlock the next level. Perhaps you could thank me by giving me a more entertaining fight. When the messenger of death rushed him this time, Sasuke realized that he was finally able to see her movements. Unlike during his fight with Lee, Byakuya's vision wasn't hazy, seeing only blurred images as the person moved. No, this time, Sasuke was able to see a clear, slow picture of his opponent's movements. And if he could see it, he could block it. This time when the Kunoichi launched a haymaker, Sasuke threw up his arm to block and their limbs collided. Sasuke saw the look of shock in the older genin's eyes and took the opening for all it was worth. He started by pushing his opponent's arm aside, and then retaliating with a right hook. Once it connected, the Uchiha Heir drove his other fist deep into the Kunoichi's stomach before gripping both hands behind her head and bringing his knee up to smash against her face. But he wasn't done yet. As her head snapped up from his last blow, Sasuke used his momentum to lift himself into the air and slam his feet into the woman's chest, sending her rocketing back into a tree. Not taking any chances, Sasuke pulled two kunai from their holster and sent them sailing towards the raven-haired woman. They trapped her hands against the trunk of the tree with a squelching thunk. As the Kunoichi wailed in pain, Sasuke flashed through a set of hand signs before calling out his strongest fire-style technique. Fire-style, Dragon Flame Jutsu. An orange dragon made of flames burst forth from the young Uka's mouth, and soared through the air towards the boy's pinned opponent. In a fiery explosion, the dragon ran right against the tree's trunk, its remains licking away at the thick wood. Sakura, who had been recovered from her horrible experience, cheered for the raven-haired heir's apparent victory. Yeah, way to go Sasuke-kun, you did it. For a brief moment Sasuke actually believed her, as his dojutsu was unable to see any traces of his opponent in the fire. But then he heard that laughter again. Only this time, he couldn't tell where it was coming from. All he's done is destroy one of my mud clones. Although with how much power I gave it, it is a bit of a surprise young Sasuke managed to come out on top. But let's see how he handles the real thing. Fast as lightning a streak bolted down from a tree and over towards Sasuke. But thanks to his eyes, the Uchiha Heir was able to see the attack coming and avoid it. As he leapt to the side, Sasuke quickly threw his arms up into a cross guard to absorb the snap kick that followed. Sasuke let himself be taken by gravity, and began to fall. As he passed a particular branch though, the genin pulled out his ninja wire and used it to swing himself to a different landing spot. Unfortunately, this caused him to lose sight of the Kusa Kunoichi. Looking for someone, Sasuke whirled around, but was too slow to avoid the Spartan kick that found its way to his chest. Managing to keep himself upright, Sasuke barely avoided the series of punches that followed the kick, before spinning on his heel and landing an elbow against the woman's back. The Uchiha quickly followed this with a palm strike that sent his opponent staggering forward. However, before he could capitalize on the Kunoichi's lack of balance, Sasuke was caught by a donkey kick to the stomach, which sent him tumbling backwards. The Kusa woman finally regained her balance, and turned her attention on the now down Sasuke. Stalking over to him, she made a noise of disappointment, like a mother scolding her child. A true Uchiha would have been able to block that. Looks like I overestimated you Sasuke, you're nothing like Itachi. Sasuke's eyes snapped open. They filled with rage at the sound of his older brother's name, and how he was being considered insignificant to him again. I think I'll do your ancestors a favor, and just end your pathetic life right here. That way, you won't bring any more shame to that crest on your art." Her condemnation of Sasuke was cut short as a series of miniature paper bombs attached to her back exploded. As the woman was launched forward by the explosion, Sasuke took that opportunity to push himself to his feet and ram his fist into her gut. From there, he flipped over her hunched form, placed the kunoichi in a hold, and let himself be torpedoed towards the ground by gravity. Uchiha clan's secret technique, Falcon Drop. A resounding crack echoed through the dense forest as the Kaigusa woman's head hit the ground. Sasuke pulled himself away and stepped back, but kept his eyes on the body in front of him. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. That proved to be a smart decision because the body shook before meeting into mud. Another clone. Searching the trees, Sasuke called out to his opponent. "For all your talk, you seem to be nothing but a one-trick pony. What happened to letting me fight the real thing? Since this fight started, you've used nothing but mud clones? What's the matter? Too afraid to fight me yourself?" What happened next was beyond anything Sasuke had expected. An enormous pressure seemed to suddenly bear down on him. It far outclassed the earlier feeling he'd had when first confronted by the Kaigusa woman. It was so bad Sasuke was brought to his knees, and then forced to keep himself up with his hands. The pure malice that seemed to seep into the air threatened to choke the very life from Sasuke as he struggled to breath. His limbs shook violently until they could no longer support the weight of the woman's power, and Sasuke was soon face down in the dirt. Motion to his right caught the young Sharingan user's attention, and with tremendous effort, he managed to peer over and take a look. It was her. She was walking over completely unharmed, as if the past half hour hadn't just happened. The Kaigusa kunoichi had a superior smirk on her face too, as if Sasuke were nothing but a bug to be squashed. "This power that you're feeling. It's only 10% of what I'm truly capable of. What you've been fighting, those clones, they were only 1% of my true strength. You never really stood a chance." Sasuke's crimson eyes widened in disbelief. 1%? No way. There's just no way. This woman, she can't be a genin, not with a power this evil. It's just not possible. The Kaigusa kunoichi saw the realization in her opponent's eyes and laughed. "That's right, I'm not really a genin, Sasuke Uchiha. No, I am someone who even the cages fear, a shinobi of such power that even your village's copy ninja pales in comparison. I am Orochimaru. And I've come all this way just to see you, Sasuke, to test your abilities. And I must say, I'm sorely disappointed." Sasuke grit his teeth and tried to push himself up onto his hands, but the immense pressure that the now identified Orochimaru's power gave off was just too much. He couldn't even twitch his fingers. And this is only 10%. Orochimaru watched as his prey struggled, the Kaigusa kunoichi's face still hiding him like a mask. "Oh, don't bother trying to fight it, Sasuke. You aren't anywhere near the level required to stave off my power's immense physical presence. But then, that's why I'm here, to give you that boost you need in order to start down the proper path. The path to a power greater than even your brother's." Onyx black eyes stared down at the pinned youth, and then with a breath, all the pressure that had been weighing Sasuke down disappeared. "That power you just witnessed can be yours, Sasuke. If you want it." Down on the ground, Sasuke took slow, shuddering breaths as he recovered from that latest ordeal. His ears were filled with the sound of his own heartbeat as it thundered within the contours of his chest, so it took the young Uchiha a moment before Orochimaru's words truly made contact. The power to kill Itachi." But before Sasuke could even utter a sound, a kunai sailed through the air, and landed between him and the disguised shinobi that stood over him. Both males turned their eyes in the direction it had come from, and were greeted by the sight of Sakura. "I don't know who you think you are, but stay away from Sasuke-kun." Orochimaru looked on from beneath his disguise and studied this new development with disinterest. Sakura was poised in a basic defensive stance, feet shoulder-width apart and a kunai clutched in both hands. And despite her attempt to look threatening, the older shinobi could clearly see the fear coming off her in waves, not to mention her trembling body. "Is this what passes for a kunoichi of the leaf now?" the false female questioned. "Your power is pitiful, nothing like my old apprentice." Sakura, having not heard Orochimaru's revealing of his identity, looked on in confusion. How could a genin have an apprentice? Orochimaru saw this and chuckled. Only this time, it was different from the sound the members of Squad 7 had heard before. This laugh was not that of a woman, but of a man. Foolish girl, you have absolutely no idea just who it is you're dealing with. As he spoke, the disguised shinobi reached up and griped his face. Before peeling it away, the sound of tearing flesh echoed through the otherwise quiet forest area, then as soon as it began, it was over. What was revealed made Sakura's trembling hands drop her kunai, and the girl herself dropped to her knees. Gone was the face of a Kusa kunoichi. In its place, the face of a man with a pasty white complexion. No longer were there soulless onyx black eyes, but horrible yellow eyes reminiscent of a snake, the eyes of a killer. To Sakura, it was the face she'd seen during her intensive studies, the face that nightmares were made of. Orochimaru of the Sannin. Sakura stared open-mouthed and trembling at the legendary shinobi that stood before her. The pink-haired girl had learned of all the greats that had come out of her village, and among them Orochimaru stood out in a class of his own. The man seemed to be the very personification of malevolent power. And he was walking towards her. It's sad really that this is what's become of my old home's kunoichi standard. You're barely more than a civilian. The pink-haired girl could do nothing as the Sannin moved closer and closer, until finally coming within inches of her kneeling form. Her trembling turned violent, and she choked on her own breath as the rogue ninja reached out and gripped her hair. With a gasp, Sakura's emerald green eyes looked past the legs that stood before her and over toward Sasuke. He was sitting on his hands and knees now, staring blankly at the ground. Sasuke-kun. Help me. Please. A laugh, cruel and dark, was what greeted the terrified young girl's ears. Against her better judgment, Sakura forced her eyes to search out the source and gazed up at the man who still had a hold of her pink strands. Malicious yellow eyes peered down at her, pinning Sakura to a single spot, and a mocking smirk was etched on their owner's face. Foolish girl, Sasuke's in no position to save anyone. He can't even save himself. But don't worry, your death doesn't interest me in any way. He saw the hope in her eyes, and decided to crush it. However, I will have to teach you a lesson in manners. It's very rude to interrupt someone's conversation. What little hope there was in Sakura's eyes flickered out like a candle, and was replaced by a look of pain as her hair was pulled. The young kunoichi's body was lifted up off the dirt, and then knocked back into a tree by a fist to the stomach. Orochimaru once again began to move, and this time Sakura started to cry. It was only seconds after her run-in with the tree that Sakura felt a sandal press down on her head and shove her face into the dirt. Her tears began to flow faster, and the terrified young genin couldn't hold back her sobs of fear. The Sannin that had her pinned down looked at his prey in a mixture of amusement and disgust. Even Enko hadn't cried the day he revealed his dark nature. This girl was pathetic. As a shinobi, it disgusts me that someone like you wears a headband and has the audacity to call yourself a ninja. You are a disgrace. To emphasize his point, Orochimaru reared his leg back, and then planted a kick right into Sakura's forehead. The sniveling kunoichi's body snapped up and back, doing a complete flip, before being caught by the neck. Green met yellow as Sakura stared into the eyes of her tormentor. I think I've changed my mind, Orochimaru amended as he pulled a kunai from his holster. You're too much of a stain on the title of shinobi to be allowed to live. But just as the villainous Sannin angled his weapon for the kill, a heavy mist began to permeate the night air. Dropping the weak kunoichi to the ground, Orochimaru laughed delightedly at this turn of events. You're much more clever than I gave you credit for, boy. Now, let us see if you can provide me with some entertainment. All was silent for a moment, and the raven-haired man almost thought his opponent had used the mist as a cover to rescue his teammates, but then he looked down and saw that the girl was still at his feet. Narrowing his eyes in annoyance, the older man called out, or perhaps you're stuck trembling in fear like your weak little friend. More silence, and then 8 points. It echoed throughout the entirety of the mist. The voice seemed to be coming from everywhere at once, impossible to pinpoint. Larynx, spine, lungs, liver, jugular, subclavian artery, kidneys, heart, Orochimaru stepped away from the pink-haired girl at his feet and began to traverse the mist. All points that, if struck, cause a fatal wound. Very good. But what will the knowledge do for you if you can't hit your target? I'm not like those other two, the voice echoed through the dense fog. So you say the Sannin jests, but you have yet to prove yourself more than just a frightened mouse hiding away in his hole. A faint, almost imperceptible whirling was Orochimaru's only warning to the oncoming first strike. But it was enough. And soon, the long-haired shinobi held out his hand and caught the blade that came spinning towards him with the intent to lop off his head. Please, not this trick again. I watched your fight with Ranmaru boy, so you'll have to do better than that. I did. In a puff of smoke, the Kubai Kiriboko Orochimaru was holding disappeared, and was replaced by Naruto, who used his free arm to swing his sword in an upward arc. He was rewarded with a splash of blood as his head cleaver sliced through flesh. Ark. Orochimaru stumbled back, his years of experience and superior skill allowing him to escape with only a slight gash. Damn it! How could I let that happen? Looking up from his wound, the Sannin snake-like eyes found no trace of the blonde swordsman. He'd escaped back into his mist. You'd better have enjoyed that lucky shot, he called out into the hazy void, because it's the only one you'll get. A sound from above allowed the legendary shinobi to be ready for the axe kick that came down on him. Orochimaru threw up one arm to block it, then used the other to grab Naruto's leg and slam him to the ground, only for him to erupt into smoke. But the assault didn't stop there. Shuffling of the ground behind him alerted Orochimaru of an attempt at his blind spot. The older male used his advanced speed to easily move out of the way, and over towards a paper bomb. An explosion of fire and smoke sent the Sannin staggering back, unready for the sweep kick that came from behind and knocked his feet out from under him. But he did manage to catch himself in the air, and then spin into an axe kick of his own, which he slammed down hard on his blonde opponent's head. He was rewarded with another clone. Standing at his full height, Orochimaru reprimanded himself for being so careless. It should have been obvious that the attack on his blind spot was a ruse. The boy had used it as a diversion to set the paper bomb. This little brat, he's a crafty one, I'll give him that. But let's see how he does out in the open, without his mist to protect him. With that thought in mind, Orochimaru gathered his chakra, and then sent it out in a purple wave. The mist was blown away, and the forest became clear again. Looking around, the Sannin immediately noticed something. His original target was gone. The blonde had distracted Orochimaru long enough so that his clones could get Sasuke and his other teammate away from the battlefield. The legendary shinobi was angry, and yet, he also found himself amused. He hadn't gotten a very good hunt out of Sasuke, and this kid was turning out to be more interesting than he'd first thought. The pale rogue chuckled darkly to himself before leaping into the trees. The hunt was on. It didn't take him long to find them. With his speed there wasn't any possibility of them escaping, and Orochimaru soon came upon the trio of Jonin hiding in the brush of a tree. Or at least, what looks like a squad of brats. The Sannin pulled out more kunai from his stolen holster and chucked them at the younger ninja. Sure enough, they exploded in a powerful combination of clone smoke and paper bombs. The kid was definitely creative, that's for sure. Now then, he mused as his yellow eyes looked around, that means he's nearby. No doubt the boy was hoping to use the explosion as an opening to attack. And sure enough, up in the trees that overlooked his position, Naruto sat with his teammates. XXX. I should have known he wouldn't fall for that again, Naruto growled low to himself. It had been a bit of a desperate move on his part, but the blonde figured it never hurt to try. Looking over at his team though, the bandaged Jonin knew he had to do something soon or risk failing the exam. Sasuke was still in a catatonic state, staring at nothing, and Sakura wouldn't stop trembling. Things weren't looking good. Hey Tem, wake up already, Naruto tried goading his raven-haired teammate into action. Come on you idiot, I don't want to have to fight this guy myself, he managed to blow away my whole mist, and he's acting like the chakra drain didn't even phase him. Wait, how do I know that? My clones were the only ones there after I picked up these two, so why do I remember him dispersing my mist and destroying my clones? Unfortunately, the curious blonde didn't get any more time to think about the strange memories because his ears were soon greeted by the frightening sound of the snake Sanin's voice. Found you. Blue eyes swiveled to search out where the voice came from, and nearly popped out of their owner's skull at what they saw. Orochimaru riding atop a giant snake. What in the world? The pale-faced shinobi laughed at his praise. Fear, do you think you're the only one in the world who has mastered the clone jutsu, boy? As my creator sped off to find you, he created me to help him search, and now that I've found you. Playtime is over, came the same voice, only from the opposite side. Naruto looked to his left, and was floored to see another giant snake eyeing him and his team like lunch. I don't get it. Naruto called out in an attempt to stall for time. What is someone like you even doing here? What do you want? The twin Sanins chuckled, as if the blonde had just told a joke. Simple, I'm here for Sasuke. I have a gift I'd like to give him that I think he'll appreciate. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He didn't like Sasuke, but he couldn't very well let a rogue ninja give him whatever this gift was. It may become a problem later. So, looking back and forth between the two snakes, Naruto voiced his response. Sorry, but even though I don't much care for the tem, I can't let that happen. Orochimaru peered down at the blonde swordsman with humor in his yellow eyes. Then, all you do is invite your own death. With that, the two snake summons charged forward, mouths open wide and ready to take a bite. In response, Naruto created 3 clones. 2 of them locked their blades with the snake's fangs, and he and the third clone launched themselves at the 2 Orochimarus. As he moved through the air, Naruto pulled Kubai Kiriboko from his back and angled it for a swing. Once he got close enough, the 9 Tails Jinchuriki brought the large butcher knife-like blade around in a horizontal slash. When his opponent jumped back to avoid it though, Naruto let the momentum of his swing take hold and buried his sword into the skull of the snake summon below him. In a large cloud of smoke, the reptile disappeared, freeing one of Naruto's clones to help him. No, he cried out while keeping his eyes on Orochimaru, stay there and defend the others. See if you can snap that tem out of his little pity party. Once his orders were given, the blonde Jonin settled into his stance, and simply stared at his superior opponent. With the snake gone, the two were once again standing atop the branch of a tree. I must say you have certainly proved yourself to be far more entertaining than either of your 2 teammates, but like I told Sasuke, you haven't even seen a fraction of my true power. And just like that, Naruto was placed under the same pressure that brought Sasuke to his knees earlier that night. What amazed the Sannin was the fact that the blonde was still standing. Yes, his legs shook from the effort, but the blonde managed to remain on his feet. This boy. What is he? Knowing that producing any more pressure would draw the attention of any shinobi beyond the forest's area, Orochimaru chose instead to allow his power to recede, and settled for drawing his kusanagi from the depths of his throat. You swing that sword with more skill than any genin I've seen, now let's see how you fare against real competition. Almost too fast for Naruto to see, Orochimaru rushed forward. It took all the blonde's speed to bring up his own blade in time, and meet his opponent's long sword in a clash of steel. Then, quick as a flash, the snake Sannin pulled back, and went for a leg sweep. Naruto leapt over this, then dug his own sword into the bark of the tree and used it to twist and launch a kick at Orochimaru's face. Orochimaru used his forearm to block the strike, and then thrust his own blade at Naruto's chest. Naruto's body was replaced with a hunk of timber when the kusanagi pierced his heart, and the blonde popped up a few feet above the serpent-like Sannin, where he brought down his large sword in an attempt to split Orochimaru down the middle. The sound of steel clashing rang through the forest as cleaver met long sword in a stalemate. Konoha's rogue Sannin heaved his blonde opponent away, but then had to slide away when Naruto stabbed his large blade in an attempt to skewer him. It was when he missed that Naruto surprised his stronger adversary. With a strength and speed that outclassed any normal genin, the blonde swung the flat of his executioner's blade and smashed Orochimaru in the back. The blow connected, and the pale swordsman was sent rolling back. Naruto attempted to rush forward, but was forced to stop when the older male shot a mouthful of snakes at him. Once again thrusting his sword into the tree, Naruto used it as a stepping stone to jump over the oncoming torrent of reptiles, and use his air time to perform hand signs. Water style, exploding water shockwave. A high-powered jet of water shot out of the blonde Jonin's mouth and straight at Orochimaru. And although the man managed to avoid the deadly blast, he watched in amazement as his younger opponent displayed enough power to punch a clean hole straight through the tree's thick branch. The Sannin didn't have long to be impressed though, because he was soon throwing up his Kusanagi in a defensive block as Naruto came down with his executioner's blade. Yellow eyes widened further when he saw an air bullet jet hurtling towards them. As he leapt away, Orochimaru looked to where the attack had come from, and almost couldn't believe it when he saw a blonde still holding their hands in the tiger seal. He can perform wind and water style techniques. It wasn't often you find a genin who could manipulate one element, let alone two. And yet this boy managed to create one of that size. No genin should be this advanced, his chakra reserves are far too large for him to be a simple low-level shinobi. The only people this young, with reserves like that are… now it makes sense. Orochimaru stationed himself along the trunk of another tree, so as to place distance between himself and the blonde. Looking over the boy and his recovered clone, the Sannin called out, "It took me longer than I'm proud to admit, but I've finally figured it out. Why, you're so much more powerful than any normal genin. You possess the nine-tailed fox." Naruto glared up at the pale-faced shinobi. "And what if I do? I don't suppose that's enough to scare away a guy like you." "Of course not," the rogue ninja replied. "It just makes this all the more interesting, especially since you have yet to even tap into the beast's power. I'm more interested in where I stand against you by myself right now." Naruto slung Kubai Kiriboko up and angled it straight at Orochimaru. "We can worry about my furry friend later." And with that, the blonde pushed off the ground and shot towards his opponent, only to use a water shockwave to push himself back and avoid being caught in a hail of snakes. Once back on solid ground, Naruto looked over to where the attack had come from, and not for the first time was unprepared for what he saw. "Anko, I finally found you. Orochimaru-sensei." Blue eyes bugged out at that revelation, and Naruto was silently thankful his bandages hid his open mouth from view. The blonde looked back and forth between the special Jonin and the Sannin, trying his best to take this news in. "Unbelievable." Anko turned her pupil-less brown eyes to the blonde that stood a few branches below her. The woman's face was set in a stern, but curious stare. Had Naruto really just been going up against her old teacher? "Ah, Anko-chan, what a pleasant surprise." The Sannin's voice cut through her thoughts, turning her attention back to the more important matter at hand. "Although I can't help wondering, just how did you know I was here?" The purple-haired kunoichi glared at her old Jonin instructor, hatred burning brightly in her eyes. "Easy, you left your mess behind. You never were very good at cleaning up after yourself, sensei." From there, I headed into the forest, and just as I was getting settled in for the night, I sensed you showboating. It was a piece of cake to track you after that. Orochimaru eyed his two opponents. The Kyuubi kid by himself wasn't really a problem, but if he were teamed with Anko, he would have to stop playing so much, and that risked exposure. Being careless was not an option against the purple-haired woman, not when she knew that jutsu. So instead, he chose the easy way out. "It will also give me time to mark my prize." The legendary shinobi placed his hand in an activation seal, and almost instantly, Anko screamed out in pain before dropping to her knees. "Anko!" Naruto cried out before leaping towards the downed woman. "Just like I thought," Orochimaru thought before he bolted from his perch. "Sasuke Uchiha is mine now." While the snake Sannin rushed off to complete his goal, Naruto was busy trying to aid the purple-haired woman that had come to his aid just moments before. "Anko, are you alright? What happened?" The woman only moaned in agony while clutching her neck area. Naruto knelt down beside her and reached out his hand, placing it over the older woman's. "Anko, I can't do anything if you don't show me what's wrong." Anko managed to pull herself together enough to lament through gritted teeth, "There's nothing you can do, Gaki. There's nothing anyone can do." With that, she pulled her hand away, and revealed what had caused her so much pain. A black dot, surrounded by 3 tomi. It was a seal. What is that thing? The purple-haired kunoichi's pain seemed to have lessened greatly, because no longer were her eyes filled with physical pain, but instead overflowing with emotional pain. "It's a curse seal. A jutsu developed by that bastard Orochimaru, and a slave collar for anyone who he decides to place it on. Blue eyes widened with realization as their owner recalled something Orochimaru had told him earlier. Something about a gift for Sasuke. Damn it. Pupil-less brown eyes peered up at the irate blonde. What's wrong? I know what he was doing here. He's going to put that thing on Sasuke. Damn it, Anko cursed. I should have known that slithery bastards always had an unhealthy obsession with jutsu. It makes sense he'd be after the only kid left with eyes that let you copy everything you see. Naruto reached out and placed the older woman's arm over his shoulder. When she tried to pull away, he simply held tighter. Anko, please, let me help you. Whatever that Tem did to you seriously wore you out. I can see it. You shouldn't be moving on your own yet. Anko looked over at the younger shinobi, her eyes searching for something. When they either found, or didn't find, what they were looking for, the woman sighed. Alright Gaki, I'll let you help me. She sent him an annoyed look. But if you tell anyone about this, I'll pound you into paste. The blonde's response was to chuckle lightly at her threat, before leaping off from the tree they'd been stationed on, and making their way towards where Naruto knew his teammates to hopefully be. It didn't take them very long to get there, but when they did, the two shinobi immediately knew that they'd been too late. Sasuke was curled up in the fetal position, hand clawing at his neck, and a crying Sakura huddled over him while he screamed. The pink-haired girl seemed to notice them through her tears, because she turned her head and wailed, he did something to Sasuke-kun. I don't know what but he bit him, and then Sasuke-kun just collapsed and started screaming. Naruto and Anko looked at each other, before turning back to look at Sakura. Move his hand, Sakura, we need to see something. Distraught and confused, the kunoichi did as she was asked. After fighting her love's strong grip, Sakura finally managed to pull the raven-haired boy's hand from his skin. What she saw made her gasp, and the other two ninja grit their teeth. There, just behind Sasuke's shoulder, was the exact same seal that Anko had been branded with. XXX. Karin stared at the gates to the forest of death with a forlorn expression on her face. She'd failed the second exam. Both of her teammates had died against one of the creatures in the forest, an inhumanly large bear, which meant she was not allowed to continue on even though she'd managed to secure both scrolls. It was so unfair. Not that she didn't care about the loss of her teammates, but she'd taken these exams for the opportunity of getting away from them honestly. For the chance to be promoted, and be allowed to prove she was more than just a face with glasses. But that wasn't happening now. Only one thing made it all worthwhile. She'd met the blonde boy that had interested her. His name was Naruto. Naruto was the reason she had survived the encounter with the bear, instead of winding up like her fellow Kusa genin. He'd swooped down with his sword and jammed the blade right between the gargantuan carnivore's eyes. The monstrous beast thrashed around in pain for a while, its thick hide not easily penetrated, before finally succumbing to its injury and dropping to the dirt unconscious. Naruto then made a point of gouging out the animal's eyes. Karin, shocked, questioned why the blonde had done that when the animal had already been defeated. His response surprised her. It was a choice between a quick, painless death in its sleep, or a slow, agonizing one for another 7 days. The bear was already going to die from the wound in his skull, so why let it suffer? And as he said this, Karin saw how the full moon penetrated the forest's treetops and surrounded the blonde like an ethereal halo. His blue eyes pinning her in place with their seemingly glowing gaze. Karin was sure she was blushing by the way her face heated up as she looked at him. From there, the red-haired girl introduced herself and got her hero's name in return. When she asked why he'd saved her, the blonde had said that he was looking for his own squad. But when Naruto noticed her in trouble, it just seemed like the right thing to do, and so he stopped and intervened. Then, Karin sorrowfully explained her own predicament to Naruto, and asked what she should do. He told her to open one of the scrolls. This confused her, so he'd explained. One of the rules was that you couldn't open a scroll until you made it to the tower, otherwise, you were automatically disqualified. The blonde questioned her how the proctor could possibly know when a scroll was opened, and when she couldn't answer, Naruto told her. They were being watched. If a team opened their scroll, somehow the shinobi in the tower would know, and then send ninja to collect them, therefore disqualifying that team. Karin had been unsure at first, but one look in Naruto's eyes told her she could trust him even if they were from separate villages. So, accepting his advice, she bid the blonde genin goodbye, offering her Earth Scroll as thanks for saving her. Naruto took it, seeing as she was being disqualified anyway, and wished her a safe trip home before leaping back into the trees. What the blonde didn't know was that he wasn't leaving with just Karin's Earth Scroll, but her heart as well. I just hope we get to see each other again one day, she thought bashfully as she was led away from the forest of death. Chapter 5. Preliminaries begin. Blood sport. Two pairs of eyes, one blue, the other brown, stared in disgust at the hideous black mark that was imprinted on Sasuke's neck. Damn it, the owner of the blue pair cursed. Naruto was upset that he'd allowed Orochimaru the opportunity to get within marking distance of his raven-haired teammate. But then, judging from the power I felt coming off that monster, there wouldn't have been anything I could have done to stop him anyway if he'd been fighting seriously. This isn't good, Anko growled from beside the blonde genin. The special Jonin hung off of Naruto's shoulder, her body still drained from fighting off the effects of her own curse mark. Sakura, who was still kneeling down beside a pain-stricken Sasuke, heard the older kunoichi and immediately asked why. Anko-san, what's wrong with Sasuke-kun? What did Orochimaru do to him? Before the woman could answer though, Sasuke let out a particularly loud wail, Oichororg. Everyone's attention was drawn to young Uchiha Heir as he rolled around on the large branch in agony. The Sharingan wielder clutched his neck tight as if getting ready to rip away the section of skin causing him so much pain. Anko noticed this, and quickly called out, quick, pull his hand away from there. Sakura jumped at the loud order, but nonetheless did as she was told. With trembling hands the pink-haired girl gripped her love's own shaking one and gently pried his fingers away. His hands. They're on fire. From what I can remember, that's normal for the first stage, Anko explained. He's going to have an intense fever for a while, and if he lives through that, the kid's gonna wish that was all he had to put up with. If he lives? The purple-haired kunoichi sent the younger girl a glare. Did I stutter? But Anko-san, I don't understand, what is this thing? What's it doing to Sasuke-kun, and why does it sound like it might kill him? Because it just might. Then, Anko turned her attention to Naruto. Do you and your team have both scrolls? Because if not, you'll unfortunately be disqualified once we reach the tower. We do, was the blonde's quick response. I'm guessing you want to tell the old man about this? Anko nodded. Yeah, he needs to know that Orochimaru was and still might be here. And there's also the matter of seeing what he can do about the kid's new little tattoo. If this is a newer version, then there might be a way to actually undo it. Alright. And with that, Naruto created a clone and had it settle the fevered Uchiha on its back. Sakura, seeing that they were getting ready to head out, stood on her feet and wiped the tears from her emerald green eyes. Sniffling, she sent a hopeful smile in the other two ninjas' direction. If anybody can help Sasuke-kun, it's Lord Hokage. I'm sure he'll be just fine. Brown and blue eyes peered at each other in concern before the group began their trek towards the central tower. What would Sakura do if Sasuke didn't make it? They made it to the tower quickly. Many of the teams had stopped for the night, leaving them a clear window. And with Anko's knowledge of the terrain, it was easy to navigate through the dark. Once they were about to exit the main area of the forest, the purple-haired woman called a stop. Naruto eyed her warily, thinking she was still worn out from being subjected to her seal, while Sakura looked antsy. What is it? What's wrong? The pink kid questioned. Nothing. In fact, it's what's right that caused me to order a halt. She turned to look at the genin that had helped move her through the forest. You can let me make the rest of the way by myself, kid. I'm definitely okay enough to walk. Are you sure, Anko? I don't mind minus. I know you don't, the special Jonin cut him off. And I appreciate the help, but there's no way I'm going in there, sung over the shoulder of a genin. The blonde's response was to give her a look of annoyed disbelief. Anko gave Naruto a playful glare. Don't give me that look, short stack. It's nothing against you personally, I'm a Jonin. How do you think it'll look to the other shinobi in the tower if we go in there with me all slung over your shoulder? Especially me being a kunoichi, it'd be bad for my reputation. Blue eyes lit with understanding. Oh, Right, okay Anko. And so the two ninja untangled themselves. At first, the older woman almost thought she'd have no choice but to re-accept the blonde Uzumaki's aid. But with a deep breath, Anko managed to pull enough of herself together to where the special Jonin felt help wouldn't be needed. From there, the group walked the remaining few yards to the tower, and upon entering were confronted by a large scroll hanging along the main wall. As Sakura began to read it though, Anko stopped her. That's not important right now little girl, we need to open those scrolls now. Sakura looked at the superior shinobi with trepidation. But you said minus. Oh for crying out loud. Anko pulled the heaven scroll from the pinkette's hand, which had been given to her during the trip, and then motioned for Naruto to pull out the earth scroll he had. Alright, now once we crack their seals we're gonna throw them on the ground, got it? When Naruto nodded his affirmative they proceeded to do as she'd said, and once the two pieces of rolled parchment hit the ground a huge plume of smoke appeared. They had summoned something. Or rather someone. Once the smoke cleared away, the group was met with the sight of Urika standing proudly before them with a big grin on his face. Although, that soon turned into a distressed look of shock when he saw the state his former students were in, as well as their company. You guys? What happened? And Anko? What are you doing with them? I thought outside help was forbidden. Explanations later Scarface, right now, I need you to report to the Hokage and tell him to get down here immediately. Tell him that it's urgent, and if he give you any drivel about the rules of the exams, then tell him that that kind of thinking might cost this village its last Sharingan user. While at first he was miffed about the Scarface comment, Urika caught the tail end of his superior's order. Once look at arriving Sasuke, and the Chunin's face set like stone as he shunching away to carry out his orders. Once he was gone, Anko turned her attention back to Naruto. Alright Gaki, I want your clone to take the Uchiha whelp to the infirmary. It's through those doors at the end of the hall. She pointed to a pair of brown double doors over on the far right. After that, just make sure you're easy to find for when the Hokage finally gets here. What about you, Anko? The special Jounin ran her hand across her face before rubbing her eyes. I'm gonna go see if I can catch a nap before the old man gets here. I'm more ragged out than I thought. And with that, the woman followed Urika's lead and exited via Shunshin, leaving Team 7 alone. Sakura took this moment to vent her frustrations and to ask questions. What kind of Jounin is she? Shouldn't she have taken us to the infirmary herself instead of walking off to take a nap? Sakura Naruto interjected, be quiet. Anko had a rough time out in the forest, worse than anything you'll probably ever go through, so leave it alone. If she's tired, let her rest and stop needing someone to hold your hand everywhere. With that, the blonde motioned for his clone to carry Sasuke to the infirmary before he himself went in the opposite direction. Sakura noticed this as she followed his clone and called out, Hey wait, where are you going Naruto? I told you before, he replied over his shoulder, I'm hungry. Just because the Thames got a new tattoo doesn't change that. Then, before Sakura could berate the young blonde, he walked through a separate set of double doors and was gone. The pinkette decided to simply glare at the Uzumaki's clone, and then huff and walk towards the medical facility. After making his exit, Naruto concentrated his senses on finding the cafeteria, going so far as to apply chakra to his nose. With this boost, it didn't take the blonde more than a moment to sniff out the scent of food. Just because I can go a few days without food doesn't mean I like it, he muttered before slinking through the halls. It was a few minutes before Naruto found his way to the food hall. But once he arrived, the young Jinchuriki decided it was more than worth the walk. The delightful smell of rice and chicken greeted his senses, and made the genin's mouth water. He loved chicken. Naruto quickly strode up to the serving line and received his plate. Alongside the rice and chicken, the blonde spotted a pile of vegetables. He grimaced. In spite of everything, the Uzumaki boy still couldn't get the pros of eating the ground-grown food to outweigh their unsavory taste. Once he had his share of food, the blonde looked around at where to sit. The choice was made for him by a waving brunette with buns in her hair. Hey TenTen, Naruto greeted politely as he came upon her team's table. The girl in question gave a friendly smile as she returned the greeting. Glad to see you managed to make it through the forest, and so fast too. She motioned for him to sit. Naruto pulled Kubai Kiriboko from its strap and leaned it against the table. Yeah, it only took us most of yesterday to get the scroll we needed. The bandaged Jonin had checked the clock and noticed that it had entered into the second day of testing. Really? That's impressive. Who'd you take it from? From some punk named Ranmari, the blonde said through a mouthful of rice. Across the table, Neji gave Naruto a disgusted look before picking lightly at his own food. Naruto glared at the male Hyuga. You got something you wanna say, pretty boy? Nothing that an uncivilized mongrel like you would understand, the white-eyed Jonin snarked. Naruto's jaw tensed. But before he could make a comeback, TenTen intervened. So, what was this Ranmaru guy like? Did he have a special jutsu he was known for yet? Actually, the blonde bit out. He wielded a giant club and pretty much said that ninja who only use jutsu aren't real shinobi. Right before using a wind-style technique. The guy's choice of weapon caught the bun-haired girl's attention, as she had yet to get a hold of one. What was it like, fighting against a Tetsubo? I mean, not too sure really. I never personally clashed steel with the guy. My clone did once, as part of a distraction, but other than that nothing. I used my mist throughout the entire fight. Oh well, that's a little disappointing, TenTen sighed. He must not have been very skilled with it then. I hear that you can make it so the spikes eject from the base, so they can be shot from a medium range distance. Guess, I'll never really know. That confused Naruto. Why not? Can't you just buy one from one of the shops around the village? TenTen shook her head. No, the war club isn't native to the land of fire, it has to be purchased in either earth or wind. Our native weapons are all blades. Oh, Naruto looked down at his half-eaten plate. Sorry, I didn't think to bring it. I didn't have anywhere to put it. You don't know basic sealing? The blonde's response was a shake of the head. Then I guess I'll have to show you how, so that something like this doesn't happen again. Wouldn't want you to come across a Miuri and have to leave Kiba behind because you had no way to bring it back. While the prospect of learning sealing intrigued Naruto, there was something that had nagged at him since their last talk. How are you so sure I'll run into this Miuri anyway, TenTen? You make it sound like it's just gonna happen. The bun-haired girl finished the last of her chicken before replying, it's because each of the 7 swordsmen keeps tabs on their fellow members, just like any other group. They would need to know when and if somebody dies, so that they can find a replacement or test the one who defeated that member to see if they deserve the honor of wielding their former comrade's blade. Naruto hummed in understanding and went to say something else, but was interrupted by the appearance of Anko, who had just arrived through the cafeteria doors. Hey kid, the Hokage's here, I need you to come with me to report on what happened. Naruto nodded before getting up from the table and returning his broadsword to its place. Turning to TenTen, the blonde gave a small apologetic smile. Sorry about the interruption. We can talk more later, okay? TenTen just gave a reassuring grin and motioned for him to go. Yeah, sounds good. Seeing as he had the okay, Naruto turned his attention back to Anko and waited for her to lead the way. XXX. The 2 shinobi made their way quickly towards the administrative part of the central tower. Once they entered into the room, Naruto and Anko were greeted with the sight of their Hokage sitting in his makeshift desk with Kakashi and Iruka standing on either side of him. Anko bowed to her leader and greeted him respectfully. Lord Hokage, I've retrieved Jonin Uzumaki for his part of the report. Thank you, Anko. Naruto's input is imperative for us to take any further action against Orochimaru. Hiruzen turned his hardened eyes to the blonde in the room and motioned for him to proceed with his report. Naruto stepped forward and began to speak. He explained how he had been drawn away from his teammates by Orochimaru's underling and how he dispatched the enemy ninja, to the shock of most of the shinobi present. After that, the blonde told of how he caught up with Orochimaru and his team, and then Naruto gave his superiors a play-by-play of his skirmish with the legendary genius. Wait, Iruka stopped him as Naruto got to the part where Anko had intervened. You know, water and wind style. Blue eyes crinkled in confusion. Iruka-sensei, what's so weird about that? I saw Kakashi-sensei use water and lighting jutsu against Zabuza in wave. His response was a number of shocked and surprised looks. Hiruzen's eyes narrowed in curious scrutiny as he stared down Kakashi. So you mean to tell me that you've already taught your student a C rank and D ranked water jutsu as well as another which happened to be a Jonin level B rank. And on top of that, he was taught a wind minus. Actually, Naruto jumped in, sorry old man, but Kakashi-sensei didn't teach me the air bullet jutsu, I taught that to myself. Urka eyed his former student with surprise and pride. Gone was the trouble-making loudmouth it seemed, and in his place was a young man who was willing to do whatever it took to succeed as a shinobi, even if it meant learning a jutsu that may not even be in alignment with his chakra nature. In the scarred Chunin's eyes, there seemed to be no doubt that Naruto would indeed be Konoha's next Hokage. Anko seemed to share a similar sentiment as she slapped a hearty hand across the blonde's back and laughed with mirth. You're a riot, you know that, Gaki? Not even a Chunin yet, and already playing around with different chakra natures, and one of M's rare to boot. I don't get it. Naruto questioned. What did I do? Kakashi will explain to you later, Naruto. For now, would you please get back to your report? We've gotten far too sidetracked. Hiruzen ordered lightly. The blonde's brows rose in realization before his face settled back into a serious look. You're right, sorry old man. Anyways, after Anko showed up, Orochimaru activated this seal that she has on her neck before taking off to find Sasuke. He knew that I would take care of a fellow leaf shinobi before chasing after an enemy. And that's when my old student gave the young Uchiha his curse seal, finished the Hokage. That's right, confirmed the Uzumaki. Hiruzen steep-held his fingers in front of his mouth and hummed lightly in concentration. The room was blanketed in silence for a time before Urka finally asked, Lord Hokage, what do you intend to do? Unfortunately, at this moment, we can't do anything about Orochimaru. He's always been a master of concealing himself, so it's highly unlikely that we'll find him, and I'd rather not cancel the exams without some measure of assurance that we'll catch him. Anko raised her hand to signal that she had something to say. When her village leader nodded for her to voice her thoughts, the woman offered that they didn't have to cancel the exams, but I think it'd be a good idea to pull the Uchiha from the exams. It's obvious that my old teacher's goal is to get his hands on the kid's Sharingan, and there's no telling what that new curse seal may do to him during the final test, so I believe it'd be best if the genin didn't participate. The Hokage mumbled. I see your point, Anko. However, if we do bar him from competing, we'll more than likely be forced to place a small platoon of Anbu as his guard until they are over. Orochimaru, as you said, is aiming for the Uka's Kekkei Genkai, and so no doubt he has a hole somewhere nearby where he's waiting for the right time to pilfer it. If we give him a guard, that would do little to stand in his way, and ultimately cost us a number of skilled ninja. The snake mistress could see where this was going and sighed, so then you're going to allow him to continue? It wasn't a question, she already knew the answer. Yes. At least so long as young Sasuke doesn't show any signs of the seal taking control of his actions. He saw the disagreement in his subordinate's brown orbs. I know how you feel about Orochimaru and that seal, Anko, but I believe the best course of action is going to be keeping Sasuke in the exams. Anko wanted to argue, but managed to hold her tongue. He was the Hokage, and in a ninja village, his word was law. In any case, I think this may give us an idea as to what young Kabuto has been compiling that information for. It's very likely that he's a spy for Orochimaru. What would a Sannin want with skill assessments of a bunch of genin? Asked Naruto. The Hokage sighed. Unfortunately, that's classified information, something a genin has no jurisdiction knowing. But if it's for what I'm thinking, then we'll need to increase village security during the coming months. We'll say that it's to protect the incoming nobles. So we're basically doing nothing with the information we have. Naruto rebuked in disbelief. We're letting Sasuke participate with that weird hickey on his neck, and just letting Orochimaru go. Before you came in, Kakashi interjected, Lord Hokage sent for the world's most renowned master of Fuinjutsu to come and take a look at Sasuke. If anyone can help, it'll be him. Hiruzen nodded in silent agreement before finishing, and there isn't much we can do about Orochimaru at the moment, Naruto. As I've already said, he's highly skilled in the art of concealing himself. We won't find him until it's either too late or he wants to be seen. So then what's left? For the moment, we continue as we have been. The second exam will finish, and then we'll see whether or not we need a preliminary round before going on to the final stage. That caught the blonde's attention. Preliminaries? Anko decided to explain this part. Yeah, Gaki, if too many people pass the second test, then we need to hold a small tournament to help cut the numbers down to size. The main event is watched by a number of important dignitaries and feudal lords. They don't want to be here all day, they're only interested in seeing the best. The more he thought about it, the more Naruto realized that made sense. And as he was dismissed from the Hokage's sub-command center, the blonde allowed his feet to simply carry him through the halls. Naruto wasn't sure how long he'd walked before a voice stopped him. XXX. Naruto, Uzumaki, I'm glad to see you made it through. This exam would have been a waste of time if you were killed off before I could feed mother your blood. Said blonde turned at the sound of his own name, and his blue eyes immediately landed on the form of one Zabuza no Gaara. The red head stood at the end of the hall, just before the next corner, with an air of complete calm. But Naruto could also feel the bloodlust seeping out and filling the hall. Tensing his body in case of a surprise attack, Naruto sarcastically replied, well, I knew you'd be expecting me, and I just hate disappointing a fan. So mind telling me what you're doing skulking around in the halls? I could ask you the very same question, Uzumaki. My Hokage wanted to congratulate me on passing the exams so quickly, I was just coming from his office. Your turn. Looking for you. Gaara's answer was short and to the point, but it made Naruto cautious. And just what do you need from me? To prove my existence to the world? Naruto was thrown for a loop when he heard this. And it was only made worse when the cork that capped off Gaara's gourd popped out, followed by a swift wave of sand shooting out, before it was aimed at the startled blonde. Ocean blue eyes looked on wide and filled with shock as their owner was confronted by a beast made of sand flying towards him. The monster's maw is wide open and its diamond-shaped eyes bore into Naruto's very soul as it roared at him. Then finally, Naruto's will clicks in and his eyes harden, shock being immediately replaced by the fire of a budding warrior. Naruto reached behind him, feeling the familiar safety that came with holding Kubai Kiriboko Chandle, and then whipped the blade out in front ready to fight off the sand demon that was quickly making its way down the hall towards him. Not wanting to just stand at wait though, the blonde let out a roar of his own, and then pushing off his right foot, ran forward to meet Gaara's attack head-on. XXX. Naruto's eyes snapped open, and he leapt into a battle stance the moment he could feel his legs. However, the blonde felt his heart leap into his throat when he didn't feel the familiar grip of his bladesandal. What the? Oh. Naruto let out a relieved sigh upon finding that he was inside the room granted to him during the Chunin exams, and that his blade rested only about 2 feet away against the wall. So then it was just a dream. But not all of it, Naruto mused as he moved over towards his clothes, intending to get dressed for the Hokage's announcement. The remaining days of the second exam had come and gone, leaving the preliminaries to be all that was left to take care of before the third and final exam could be announced. The blonde's dream was an exaggeration of his meeting with Gaara a few days ago. He'd left the Hokage's makeshift office and ran into the dangerous red head in the halls. Gaara had indeed been looking for him, but not so they could fight, just to make sure Naruto had indeed survived the forest of death. After very little word exchange, which included a veiled threat from the Suna ninja, the two shinobi went their separate ways. And now, days later, it was time to begin the preliminaries. Naruto knew that they'd be needed after counting up the number of shinobi who'd made it to the tower, but he was interested to know how the others would react to the news that not everyone who passed would go on to the final exam. But then all those important clients aren't going to care about the bottom feeders. They're only interested in the sharks. And it was this thought that pushed Naruto out the door and towards the indoors arena. The walk wasn't very long, and within about 10 minutes of making his way through the halls, Naruto found himself at the double doors that lead to the fighting area where the preliminaries would be taking place. Placing his hand on the door, the blonde stopped himself and allowed his eyes the opportunity to peer into the room and see just who his competition could be. Almost immediately Naruto found Gaara, the boy's crimson mop top an easy identifier. And then his blue eyes traveled over in Sasuke's direction, as well as Neji and Lee's. In Naruto's opinion, those four were the ones who would give him the best chance to show off his skills. Now I just hope I don't have to face one of them in these knockout rounds. The finals will be boring if there aren't enough high-level opponents. As he thought this, the Uzumaki boy pushed open the doors and made his way inside. The sound of his entrance reached everyone's ears, it seems, as the entire hall of shinobi turned to look at him. It was during this time that Naruto noticed the different reactions his presence received. He noticed the smile on the elderly Hokage's face. The Sandaime was most likely relieved the blonde showed up on time. Next to him were both Anko and Kakashi-sensei, each with their own looks of approval on his timely appearance. TenTen sent the Uzumaki a smirk of her own, likely glad that she'd have a chance to battle him again. Another kunoichi who was glad to see him, Naruto realized, was Hinata, who had a red tint in her cheeks and a grateful smile as if she were thanking the gods above for his arrival. But where there was positive, there was also negative, mainly from those who looked at the blonde as just either more competition in the case of the Odo trio and Neji, or a nuisance that needed to just go away in the case of the remaining competitors. "Ah, Naruto, so glad to see you up and able to join us," the Sandaime greeted him kindly. "A little more promptness next time though, the daimyo won't be so inclined to forgive such disrespect." For his part, Naruto simply rubbed the back of his head as he apologized. "Yeah, sorry about that. I had a hell of a dream and it was a doozy to fight my way out of it. I'll be sure to be on time for the finals." With that, the Hokage turned his attention back to the assembled crowd in front of him. Clearing his throat, the elderly shinobi began to speak. "Now, as I was saying, it's great to see so many promising young genin this year, but as you've just heard me tell one of my own shinobi, there will be important clients coming to the finals. This means that we'll be cutting the current number of you in half." This was met with cries of indignation and disbelief. How could they do this to them after all the hard work all the genin put in? "I know many of you are upset," Anko intervened, "but those daimyo and leaders won't be interested in seeing anything but the best. They also have their own lands to govern, so it'd be best that we don't keep them for too long." Shikamaru rose his hand at this point, indicating he had a question, and when Anko gave him the go-ahead, he asked when the preliminaries would be taking place. "That'll be done right now to give the finalists an entire month to train for the finals, as well as test the resolve of each and every one of you. Those of you who can't pull out a win in your current condition will just have to strengthen your skills, and your will before trying again next time." Now this information nearly caused a riot with some of the genin present, but the feeling of the third Hokage's chakra pressure settled them all quickly. Once he saw that no one would interrupt his next words, the elderly warrior began to speak again. "Now then, you don't have to take these preliminaries. If you feel that you aren't in any condition to fight, simply raise your hand and we'll take down your name, then you'll be free to leave." As he said this, Hiruzen counted out the number of candidates. If nobody opted out, then they'd be uneven matches, meaning someone would need to fight twice. Thankfully, someone did quit. And the person who chose to cut loose strangely didn't surprise the old cage. "I guess that'll be me, I quit." It was Kabuto. The bespectacled youth had his gloved hand raised high in the air, making sure everyone could see that it was him who quit. Then, after Anko marked him off, the silver-haired genin made his exit. No one saw the conniving look in his eye, or the secret smirk that etched its way onto the Odo Jounin's face. But even without those, Anko and her Hokage still shared a look as they both thought the same thing. That was no coincidence. Kabuto had dropped out around the same time during each of his other tries. While it may be normal for a genin not to make it on their first, or even second try when you've taken the Chunin exam 6 times, any normal person would assume you'd simply give up being a shinobi by that point. This was beyond strange. Unfortunately, those thoughts and questions would have to be out on hold as the preliminaries needed to get underway quickly to give everyone optimal time to rest. So, after clearing her voice, Anko went to speak again. Only to stop as another Jounin appeared using Shunshin. "Lord Hokage, Anko-san, if you cough. Don't mind, I'd like to be the one who explains the cough. Preliminaries." Anko looked to her fellow Jounin with a worried look. Hayate had gotten an unfair deal in life, caught in a gas explosion during a sting at one of Orochimaru's hidden labs. The devious snake had been working with an experimental toxin and Hayate had breathed it in during the battle with Orochimaru's guards. And since only that bastard knew the compounds of the gas, no one's been able to help Hinata. It's a sad bit really, he saves thousands of lives by ruining his own. I can still remember how hard Yugao took it when she heard the news. And yet the swordsman didn't let that stop him, never losing his place as Konoha's most powerful kenjutsu user. After his mentor, of course, the ever-feared Red Death, one of Konoha's most famous ANBI members. With those thoughts filling her head, Anko relented. Of course Hayate, if you feel up to it I mean. I'm fine Anko-san. Cough. But thank you for your concern. The sickly-looking Jonin turned from the purple-haired woman to the group of genin and spoke again. Now first off, my name is Jeko Hayate and I. Cough. Will be the proctor for the preliminaries. Before we begin, however, there are. Cough. A few rules you all need to be made aware of. From there the master swordsman went on to explain that the matches would be done randomly using the match board that appeared behind him. Anything goes during the matches, including killing your opponent, but as Proctor Hayate had the right to step in before anything too gruesome happened, as well as if it looked like the fight was unfair. There was to be no outside help, and the match ended when someone gave up, was unconscious, unable to continue, or Hayate himself called it. So if there aren't any question, I'll proceed to the first match's selection. And as he said this, the board above him began to race through the different names in its system. What it came out with was something interesting. Naruto, Uzumaki vs. Dosu Hinata. Cough. If all but the chosen fighters could exit the arena and head up into the upper platform, we can. Cough. Get this started. With the instructions given, all the genin, minus Naruto, and his opponent, began to walk towards the stairways. As both Hinata and TenTen passed the blonde, though, each had their own words for him. Gee, good luck in your match, and Naruto-kun, I'm sure you'll do great. Naruto gave the blushing brunette a kind look, thanking her for her words, before watching her shuffle off after that. Almost immediately after, though, the blonde found himself confronted with the bun-haired visage of TenTen. You better win, she threw out immediately. If you don't, then I'll think it was a mistake asking you to help me with my dream. Besides, who else will I clash steel with in the finals if you aren't there? This time, the Uzumaki gave his fellow Leaf Shinobi a challenging smirk. The finals, huh? Won't you need to get past the preliminaries first, TenTen? She scoffed. Che, other than you, I can only think of maybe 2 or 3 other people I don't think I have a sure chance against, and 2 of them are on my team. TenTen then patted Naruto on the shoulder and began to walk away. Anyway, good luck, and I'll see you in the finals, partner. With that, she joined the other genin up on the platform with the Jonin, leaving just the blonde and his mummified partner with Hayate standing between them. Alright, you both know the rules, so if each of you is good to go, I'll begin the first match of the preliminaries. I'm good, Naruto affirmed as he set his hand on Kubai Kiriboko's handle. Let's get this over with, Dosu grumbled. He was upset that he and his team's mission had been ruined, and was in no mood to be playful. Very well then. Begin. With that, the sickly-looking man leapt away from the pair to a safe distance, allowing them more than enough room to do battle with. I suggest you just give up now, Dosu offered as he eyed his blonde opponent. I'm not in a very good mood right now, and if you stay, I can't be held responsible if our match ends in your shinobi career stopping short on account of my killing you. If Naruto was thinking of the offer, he didn't show it. Instead, the blonde pulled his giant cleaver from its place on his back and brought it down, aiming for Dosu. Smirking behind his bandages, Naruto gave his reply. Funny. I was just about to suggest the same thing for you. Hearing this just made the sound shinobi sigh. He tried to give the kid a way out, he really did, but the blonde idiot insisted on standing in his way. So, pulling back his sleeve, Dosu revealed his large bracer and said, very well then, if death is what you choose, then I will do my best to get you there as quickly as possible. Age before youth, you old mummy, save me a seat, will ya? That was the last straw for Dosu. Who did this little twerp think he was? The cycloptic genin reared back, and then with a huff of exertion, rushed towards the sword-wielding blonde. But he never made it there. Naruto had recalled the little incident during the first exam, when Dosu attacked Kabuto, and knew better than to let whatever was on the older boy's arm anywhere near him. Instead, as the Odo shinobi made it halfway over to him, Naruto jumped back to re-widen the gap between them. Once he landed, Naruto returned the legendary blade in his hand to its sheath before going into a small chain of hand signs. After finishing, the blonde called out his attack, to the shock of many who knew him. Wind-style air bullet. A large shot of compressed air hurtled its way towards the one-eyed sound ninja at great speed. However, it didn't move quite fast enough, because Dosu managed to dodge it, only feeling the passing razor's edge shred the ends off his long sleeves. But as he landed, the teen realized that this had been part of the blonde's plan. Seeing the large, sharp weapon coming down at him, Dosu did the only thing he could think of in order to keep from using his bracer as a shield. He used his bare hand. With the weight of the blade pushing down, and how easy it is for the Kubai Kiriboko to slice through flesh, it was no surprise that blood was soon splattering to the floor, dribbling from Dosu's hand like milk from a spilled carton. Yet in spite of this, and any pain the spectators were sure he was feeling, the Odo ninja was smiling. Although one could only tell if they looked closely. Naruto was one of those people. What are you all happy for? I just made you a permanent handicap. There's no way you can use that hand again. Dosu just laughed. It's more than worth it though, because now I've got you right where I want you. With that declaration, the older boy swung his free hand around and knocked it against the side of Naruto's head. With the amount of chakra I funneled into my bracer, that blow should pop his head like a cork, were the overzealous thoughts of the Odo ninja as he waited for the bloodbath. But it never came. Instead, in its place, was a large cloud of smoke as the shadow clone of Naruto was destroyed. What? A clone? Well, of course, came Naruto's voice from up above. Do you really think I'd come at you myself after I know how your technique works? Everyone, including Dosu, moved their eyes around the stadium in an attempt to find where Naruto's voice was coming from, but it wasn't until Anko laughed out loud that they noticed just where he was. The blonde had stuck himself to the roof. It seemed the air bullet was meant as more than just a wall so Dosu wouldn't see blonde change out with a clone. No, it was made just the right size too, so that the one-eyed genin wouldn't be able to see Naruto leap up to the roof either. Of course, part of me thought the clone would have been enough, but I didn't anticipate you having the guts to sacrifice your own hand for a killing blow. I'm impressed. Naruto cut the chakra feet to his feet, and allowed himself to fall back to the arena floor. Once he was situated again, the blonde continued speaking. In fact, I'm so impressed. I'll give you a quick death instead of the slow, humiliating one I had planned before. As he gave his respects, the blonde, once again, pulled his cleaver from its sheath, and set it to touch the ground. Then Naruto closed his expressive blue eyes, tensed his muscles. And he was gone. HRK. That sound drew everyone's attention, and then made those with weaker stomachs look away, the sight being much more than they were used to. This was mainly the rookies, as all the others had seen death many times over. Naruto stood in front of Dosu with about half his blade between them, while the remainder was lodged so far into the sound shinobi's chest that it came out his back. The bandages that were wrapped around his face were quickly stained with all the blood that gushed from the teen's mouth. And while the cut was fairly clean, that didn't stop the copious amounts of blood that oozed from the open wound and onto the tile floor. Or at least, the blood that didn't already find itself dribbling down Naruto's blade, and painting it a deep, crimson red. With a sickening squelching sound, Kubai Kiriboko was pulled from Dosu Hinata's chest cavity, and then returned to its home on Naruto's back. The blonde simply watched as his opponent's body crumpled like a bloody rag doll to the ground, where the older boy continued for a few moments to choke on his own blood before forever going silent. It was safe to say that Naruto Uzumaki had won the first match of the preliminary rounds. The arena was quiet, nobody up on the platforms made a sound, and all eyes were trained on the pair that stood center stage in the middle of the floor. Well, one was standing, while the other lay dead in a pool of his own blood. Naruto had just finished doing battle with Dosu, and while some didn't worry about the blonde's chances to pull out a victory, none of those supporters would have guessed just how Naruto would claim the win. He'd killed his opponent. Yes, the Chunin exams did often include genin taking their first life, but many of the shinobi present didn't think the Uzumaki had what it took to actually take the life of another human being. And then look so calm about it. It was just strange. Most had even expected Naruto to lose his match, as in their minds he was still the brainless prankster from the academy, But all those doubts and expectations were washed away by the bloody picture that had been presented to them. Kakashi, what? What in the world have you been doing with this kid? The Jonin in question turned to the one who'd spoken and told Kirena that he hadn't really done anything with the blonde youth down at the bottom floor. Bullshit, Asuma cut in. A 13-year-old kid doesn't just go from dead last to Deathbringer in half a year by themselves. You must have been giving him private lessons. This time Kakashi turned his eye towards Naruto, who still happened to be waiting for Hinata to dismiss him, and spoke with a sense of reverence as he explained himself. I didn't say he didn't get training from me. He is my student after all. But I had nothing to do with this new Naruto that you all see down there. For that you can all thank one Zabuza Momoki. Kakashi's fellow Jounin were caught off guard by this bit of information, and it was Guy who jumped to ask, what exactly do you mean by that, Kakashi? What does Curious Demon have to do with anything? Everything. Naruto met him during our first C-rank mission, and after the mission ended, my student decided to honor the memory of a shinobi who opened his eyes to the realities of our world. Kirena eyed her senior Jounin wearily, and so he's honoring a serial killer by trying to become him. When you think about it, aren't we all just a bunch of serial killers, Kirena-sensei? The red-eyed beauty in question flinched at hearing Naruto's voice behind her. He must have been declared the winner while we were talking. Doing her best to put on a disarming smile, Kirena went on to answer the blonde Uzumaki's question. She told Naruto of how, in a sense, he was correct, but the distinctive difference between the average shinobi and those like Zabuza was that the demon of Kiri held no regard for the life of others. He kills for the sake of killing or personal gain. Whatever reaction Kirena was expecting, the sharp-eyed look she got was not it. Naruto's normally ocean blue eyes had darkened to an icy, almost sapphire color. His rapt jaw could be seen clenching in anger at the statement, and even anyone paying attention could see the way his neck muscles bulged from the restrained lash-out that Naruto no doubt wished to let loose. But that wouldn't be what Zabuza would do, he thought before responding to Kirena's assessment. Zabuza Momoki killed so that he could achieve his dream of one day ruling Kirigakure as the Mizukage, and any killing he did before becoming a rogue ninja was done in service to the current Mizukage, just like any other shinobi of a hidden village. But Naruto, Ino butted in, what does that say about him if this guy wound up becoming a runaway ninja? He couldn't have been a very honorable guy, sounds more like a slime ball to me, hey. Ino's 2 cents were thrown out when Naruto jumped in her face. What do you know about anything, Ino? You and your team haven't done anything other than walk villagers' dogs and weed gardens, so what do you know about honor, or even what it really means to be a shinobi? Hey. Asuma jumped in after seeing his student get verbally assaulted by one of her fellow genin. Naruto, calm down, there's no need to be so hostile, alright? Ino was only asking, she wasn't trying to offend anyone. Well, maybe you should get her a shock collar for that big mouth of hers to teach her not to open it unless someone's actually talking to her minus. Naruto, Kakashi cut him off. That's enough, you've made your point. Ino's sorry for being inconsiderate of your feelings and her lack of understanding, but I'm also going to need you to apologize to Asuma for being so rude. And what about me? Kirena wondered. He disrespected me too, Kakashi, or did you forget that? The silver-haired Jounin in question just said in response and went on to say, actually Kirena, I wouldn't say that, you actually disrespected Naruto and his feelings. So if anything, you owe him an apology. You know what? Never mind. This is a pointless argument. Everyone has their own opinion and it won't be changed without examples, so why don't we just go back to watching the fights, because it looks like Kiba and Sasuke are up next. Hearing this, everybody turned their heads to the selection board and found that, yes, Sasuke was indeed up next with Kiba being his opponent. Naruto, the one who pointed it out, just crossed his arms and eyed his teammate as the raven-haired genin made his way down to the arena. The blonde-headed youth was curious to see how Sasuke would do in his battered state. We'll see if his spot as Rookie of the Year outweighs Kiba's alpha male instinct. Down below with the 2 clan heirs, Sasuke and Kiba were busy eyeing each other with fire in their eyes. For Sasuke, it was about showing off his superior skill and putting the Inuzuka pup in his place. For Kiba, it was about proving that he was the top dog, and the Uchiha was nothing but a poser. In the end it was really just a battle of egos. Alright. Cough cough. You two know the rules. The match stops when either. Cough cough. One of you surrenders, can't continue or I. Cough. Declare a winner based on what I see. Hinata explained. Then, after explaining to Sasuke that Akamaru was considered a tool, and not a partner so the Nin-Ken could be part of the battle, the Jonin swordsman declared the match a go. Sasuke's first move was to actually not move at all. He knew that Kiba would want to start things off, so the Uchiha youth simply waited to counter whatever it was his opponent thought up. With the days of rest he'd gotten after being brought to the tower, and having the mark sealed by Kakashi, Sasuke was more than ready to get used to his body again. And, thankfully, Kiba remained predictable and attacked first. The hooded genin shot forward with his elbow aimed for Sasuke's sternum, crying out how he'd end the match in one hit, only to miss when Sasuke leapt into the air. Kiba managed to stop himself soon enough though, and had time to block the axe kick that came down at his head. The Inuzuka threw up an arm, stopping Sasuke's leg with his forearm, before gripping the offending appendage and using it to fling the Uchiha away. When Sasuke recovered though, managing to flip in the air and land on his feet, Kiba decided it was time to use his signature jutsu. Gotsuga. Kiba twisted his body at rapid speed, moving like a drill through the air, and heading straight for Sasuke. But Sasuke saw this coming and was able to avoid being hit by dodging to the side. As he hung in the air, the Uchiha attempted a quick counterattack and threw a small hail of kunai at the rotating vortex, only to watch as they bounced off and away, leaving Kiba unharmed. Well, that didn't have any effect, but I'd rather not waste any chakra trying to hit it with my fireball, so that just leaves waiting it out and hitting him once his jutsu ends. And good for Sasuke, Kiba's signature technique wasn't famous for its hang time. The Inuzuka member spun out soon after his opponent assessed the situation and was back on his feet ready to be engaged. Something Sasuke took prime advantage of. With the enhanced speed he'd acquired during his first C-rank mission, Sasuke quickly closed the gap between himself and Kiba, where he then went on to open up with a sweep kick. But Kiba, always just a few steps behind Sasuke, was still fast enough to avoid being knocked off his feet, if only just barely. And once he was in the air, Kiba decided to try a counter and threw his legs out in a double kick aimed for his opponent's head. When Sasuke ducked to avoid it, Kiba used the momentum to flip backwards onto his hands, and then springboard up into the air. Unfortunately for him, this was Sasuke's plan all along. With the Inuzuka boy stuck so close in midair, Sasuke knew there would be no time for him to activate his Gotsuga, or even dodge a fireball. So, still crouched against the arena floor, the Uchiha Avenger quickly flashed through his three favorite hand signs, and let loose a medium-sized great fireball. Arg. Or at least, he would have had he not just got bitten by Akamaru. The little ninja dog had noticed his partner was in trouble and chosen just the right moment to step in and lend a hand. Akamaru now had his teeth sunk down into Sasuke's calf, forcing the Uchiha to lose control of his attack and sputter as he drops to the ground. It was then, after seeing Kiba land safely, that Akamaru let go and returned to his partner's side. Great job, Akamaru, the Inuzuka boy praised as he scooped up his pal. I would have been turned into burnt toast if I didn't have you watching my back. Way to go, buddy. Turning his slightly feral gaze over to his downed opponent, Kiba began to gloat. How do you like that, Sasuke? Looks like you aren't as tough as everyone makes you think. It's a shame you're all that's left of the Uchiha clan. They must be crying in their graves at how weak you are. Or maybe all those stories we heard about them were just that, stories to cover up for how big of an embarrassment they were as shinobi. As he broke out into boisterous laughter, Kiba failed to notice the change in Sasuke's demeanor. While he was still on the ground, the lone survivor of the Uchiha massacre was stock still and rigid. His right hand, which was angled back and clutching the injured leg, was now squeezing down on the bite marks to the point of drawing blood. Sasuke's left hand, which was set against the floor so as to steady him, was trembling as it clawed into the tile below. And yet, despite all this, Sasuke's barely concealed rage was made clear in a way that trumped it all. His eyes. Underneath his raven black hair, Sasuke's eyes were hard and cold. They spoke volumes of emotion, of fury, which bled through in the form of his Sharingan. Only, this time, the colors were switched. Blood red now lay in a pool of deadly black. XXX. Up on the platforms, Kakashi was reprimanding Kirena for her student's mouth. I think you and I both know that was completely uncalled for. Kirena, you need to have a word with Kiba about keeping his mouth shut. I'm sure I don't need to remind you of just how sensitive that subject is to Sasuke. The Genjutsu mistress did in fact look apologetic as she replied to her senior Jonin's words. I do know, and I'm sorry about Kiba's brashness. I'll have a talk with him and his mother after the preliminaries. I hope so, because next time we'll be having this discussion in front of the Hokage. While the combatants' respective sensei were discussing punishment for the loud-mouthed Inuzuka, over with the genin some had their own opinions about what should happen to Kiba. The loudest of which calls came from the Uchiha boys' two most loyal fans. Would you two quiet down already, geez? Yeah, what Kiba said crossed a line, but that doesn't mean you gotta get so loud about it. This whole preliminary thing is troublesome enough without you girls squawking. Shut up, Shikamaru, Ino shouted back in response. That much shouldn't have said that about Sasuke-kun's family and you know it. He should be fined or something. What kind of punishment is that? Temurai butted in from the side. She'd been close enough to hear the bickering and was now curious to know what made this Sasuke so special that someone would be fined for speaking ill of the kid's family. Is he some relative of your Hokage or something? Ino turned to her fellow blonde and answered, well, no. But his ancestors helped create the village, and he's the last surviving Uchiha. Temurai waited for a minute, and when she realized that the Konoha Kunoichi was done speaking asked what else was there. He was Rookie of the Year in our class. Is that all? Because from what I'm hearing this kid is just another headband in the crowd. I mean, sure, having a tool like the Sharingan is a rare and powerful thing nowadays, but from what I've seen he can't even use it to its full potential, so he's not really any better than his opponent down there. And then there's the fact that last year's Rookie of the Year is at least 10 times stronger than Sasuke. Heads swiveled on their necks to turn and look at who'd spoken, and all eyes landed on TenTen, who had broken away from her teammates to put in her 2 cents. Something that Sakura didn't appreciate. Oh, and how would you know? He's on my squad, TenTen answered with a smug smirk. Neji Hyuga is reported to be the strongest genin of his generation, a prodigy. It was Shikamaru who spoke next, and his words popped the bubble of superiority that the bun-haired girl had blown around herself. I'd be careful about throwing that word around if I were you, because last time I checked, the last person to be named a prodigy wound up murdering his entire clan in cold blood. Maybe you should make sure this Neji isn't secretly a sociopath. How do you think Konoha will fare in the world with the destruction of its second strongest clan too? For the first time since she'd met him, TenTen began to wonder about Neji and the actual possibility that the hate-driven Hyuga might actually attempt such a thing. Stop scaring her, Shikamaru. Sasuke's brother was a special case, and you know it. Remember my sensei was a prodigy too, and look at where he is now, Naruto chimed in. The blonde had moved away from the Jonin after pointing out that the match's opponents had been selected and now stood with his fellow genin. He'd originally not wanted to get involved with the conversation, but the Uzumaki felt he should lay TenTen's obvious fears to rest. Something the weapon mistress was grateful for, as shown by the small smile of relief she sent Naruto's way. She looked as if she was about to say something too, but whatever TenTen had planned was blown into the wind by a powerful chakra pulse. One that made her knees buckle and the hairs on her neck stand on end. At first, TenTen thought it was just her that had felt it, but she soon realized that wasn't the case, as every genin soon snapped their head back to the arena, where Sasuke was seen surrounded by a swirl of black chakra. He was pushing off the ground and getting back to his feet, where the Uchiha went on and entered into his clan's standard fighting stance, Sharingan blazing in all its glory. What the heck happened to Sasuke's Sharingan? XXX. Who does that mutt think he is disrespecting my clan that way? He knows nothing about what happened that night, or what our history is. His blasphemy is unforgivable. Sasuke slowly rose up from the arena floor and back to his feet. His knuckles popped as the Uchiha flexed his fingers, emotions of rage and anger radiating off of Sasuke's hunched form. And yet, despite this, Kiba still opened his mouth for another insult. Ooh, a little slow getting up there, pretty boy. What's the matter? Did we have the match before your nap time, little baby? Maybe we should go find mommy so she can tuck you. Minus Kiba's mockery was ground to a halt by Sasuke snapping his head up and staring him down with his inverted Sharingan. What the? Sasuke's voice was guttural and rumbled like thunder. Don't talk about my mother. The furious Uchiha disappeared from Kiba's view in a burst of unbelievable speed, moving beyond anything Kiba believed Sasuke to be capable of, and backhand the Inuzuka against his cheek with a thunderous thwack. Kiba didn't have the time to even think about channeling chakra to his feet to keep himself planted, and instead wound up rocketing through the air with Akamaru clutched to his chest. The hooded genin hit the ground hard, cracking the tile on impact, and then rolling another few feet before coming to a stop. From his place on the arena floor, Kiba spat out the mouthful of blood that stained his teeth before raising himself up shakily onto his knees. The first thing Kiba did was check on his Ninken, making sure the little pup was okay, before turning his animalistic eyes onto Sasuke. He saw how the Uchiha was, literally, looking down at him. Sasuke's head was up high, nose in the air, and his reverse-colored Sharinganis bore down at the Inuzuka boy. Kiba's opponent stood at his full height ready to continue the match, looking on as if the fanged youth wasn't even a threat. This angered Kiba. Look down at me, huh? Well, we'll see how high and mighty you feel after I break out my clan's secret weapon. What's the matter, Kiba? Sasuke broke the downed Inuzuka out from his thoughts. Where's all that talk? You were just shooting your mouth off a minute ago, disrespecting my clan, so what happened? Did I hit you too hard, maybe knock out that tiny brain of yours? Kiba laughed mockingly. You're the one who's shooting their mouth off, Uchiha, but not for long, not after I use this. Sasuke watched as his opponent pulled out a pair of red pills, feeding one to his pup before ingesting the other himself. And while the raven-haired youth knew about food pills and their properties, what happened next was something that far exceeded any normal chakra booster. First, Kiba dropped Akamaru and let the pup fall on all fours before falling after the animal himself. While arcs of neon blue chakra began to weave their way around the young Inuzuka, his puppy partner's snowy coat turned a blazing crimson. Then, while Akamaru was engulfed in a flare of chakra of his own, Kiba's arcs upsurged into a raging flame. And that's when Sasuke's eyes saw it. Kiba was changing. The tattooed youth's teeth gnashed as they elongated from canines into fangs, and his fingernails sharpened into claws. Along with that, Sasuke could see from the other boy's calves that Kiba's muscle mass was increasing too. He was getting stronger. And if that pill is what I think it is, then he's going to be faster too. And, oddly enough, the thought of an increased challenge only made Sasuke more excited. It made his blood rush and his own chakra flare. The pitch-black energy pulsed as its flow increased. What nobody noticed though was that the mark on Sasuke's shoulder was lit up like a beacon. The standoff was brought to a halt when, in a final flash of chakra, Kiba's transformation finished, leaving a werewolf-looking Inuzuka in his place. His hair was shaggy and now reached his shoulders, while his jaw had extended to a small snout. Kiba's feral, bloodshot eyes were turned up and staring into Sasuke's own. Now, he rumbled, his hand settling into the ram hand sign. Let's get wild. A puff of smoke later and Akamaru was gone, replaced by an exact copy of Kiba. Sasuke's inverted dojutsu watched Kiba's transformation, and then as the Inuzuka sat his man-beast clone technique on Akamaru, turning the raging pup into an exact copy of the newly improved Kiba. And yet despite this, Sasuke felt no fear. The only one thing the last Uchiha knew was a burning desire to bring his opponent to their knees. He wanted to make Kiba pay for insulting him, insulting his family, and nothing was going to get in the way of that. Nothing. Sasuke raged internally. He was ready for this. He was minus. GRHK. That was only sound that managed to make its way out of Sasuke's mouth as he was caught under the chin by an uppercut. It seemed Kiba was faster than he'd anticipated. Or maybe I was stupid and let my guard down, but Sasuke recovered quickly and was ready for his opponent's follow-up. Kiba had followed him into midair, more than likely assuming he'd get another free shot, and was directly underneath Sasuke. Got you, the last Uchiha thought smugly before righting himself and landing an axe kick down on the other boy's skull. Sasuke watched as Kiba's body quickly descended from the sky, only to have to twist so as to avoid being run through by a high-speed tornado. He'd already forgotten about Akamaru. And that cost the Sharingan wielder dearly, as his right side suffered from close contact with the spinning death trap. Sasuke let himself fall back to the ground, only to hunch over as he held the bleeding area around his ribs. Akamaru's tornado stopped, and the transformed dog landed on his feet. He turned an eye towards his partner, and was relieved to see Kiba getting off the ground and back on his feet. Akamaru barked to his friend, asking if the Inuzuka boy was alright. Kiba rubbed his aching head, thankful for the huge adrenaline rush that came with taking his family's special food pill. Yeah, I'm fine buddy, he just got in a lucky shot is all. But now I'm ready, so let's show this pompous pretty boy who's the real top dog around here. And with that the two primal partners were ready for action again. Kiba took the lead again, but this time he tried for something other than a frontal assault. The Inuzuka boy reached into his hip pouch and produced a pair of smoke bombs. Knowing that just throwing them at Sasuke would do no real good as the Uchiha could just jump away before being engulfed, Kiba signaled to Akamaru to create a distraction. The transformed pup nodded in understanding before rushing in. Akamaru got close, but veered off at the last second, showing the attack to be a feint. The real attack came next in the form of an attempted leg sweep from behind. Thankfully for him, Sasuke was much faster than Akamaru, so the Uchiha had no problem jumping to avoid the attack and only a little difficulty flipping over Kiba as the Inuzuka boy came barreling by. His side throbbed in pain, yes, but it was better than the alternative. Unfortunately though, Sasuke had been nursing said wound while Kiba had pulled out the smoke bombs, so he wasn't prepared for his vision to suddenly be clouded by a thick purple haze. This left him open to the Spartan kick to the back that sent him stumbling into a punch to the gut. As he doubled over in pain, the Uchiha Avenger was struck a third time by a bicycle kick that sent him rocketing into the air. Sasuke quickly managed to right himself though, and turned his inverted Sharingan towards the heavy cloud of smoke. And that's when he noticed it. He could see. It wasn't a completely clear picture, but Sasuke was able to make out the forms of both Kiba and Akamaru from inside their little trap. Something that the young Uchiha knew wasn't possible before that day. Movement in the smoke drew Sasuke's mind away from that though and back into the fight. One of the Kibas was moving, gearing up for another Gotsuga. Moments later, a whirling tornado came ripping through the shroud and barreling straight for the airborne Uchiha. And that's when Sasuke was hit with a wave of nausea. What the huh? Were Sasuke's eyes playing tricks on him, or was there another tornado ghosting itself from out behind Kiba's? Either way, the Sharingan wielder's body reacted, avoiding his opponent only to be forced into narrowly dodging a second tornado that came from underneath. As he let gravity bring him back to the arena floor, Sasuke's ears caught the tail end of Kiba's conversation with Akamaru as their attempted double team failed. I don't know how he managed to avoid that one buddy, but don't worry, we'll get him next time. And that made Sasuke think, how did he manage to dodge that last attack? It was like his body just moved on its own after that weird double vision he'd been hit with. But like last time, Kiba and his partner didn't give Sasuke much time to ponder these thoughts before going back on the offensive. One of the two came rushing in and engaged the last Uchiha in close combat. Sasuke ducked the swipe to his head and threw up a cross block to stave off the axe kick that came after before grabbing his opponent's leg and striking out at the pit behind their knee. The Kiba copy let out a rough grunt of pain, revealing himself to be the real Inuzuka. From there, Sasuke threw the leg aside and caught Kiba in the chest with a swift combo of punches. It was after he jumped back to finish off with a double kick to the chest that Sasuke saw it. There was a hole in the ground. And then he was hit with another nausea attack. A ghostly copy of Kiba was angled at the ground and performed a Gotsuga, creating the hole and then vanishing in a wisp of smoke. Behind, Sasuke's instincts screamed at him to flip back, and being from a warrior clan, the raven-haired youth was taught to trust his instincts. For good reason too, because mid-flip Akamaru exploded out of the ground and flew right underneath his intended target. At such speed and so little time to move though, the Nin-ken had no choice but to keep going forward. Straight into Kiba. Heir. The Inuzuka was sent rocketing backwards, before slamming against the arena floor, and then rolling to a stop. Akamaru quickly ended his attack and stared blankly at the beaten form of his downed friend. He stared and stared, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. And then he started twitching. First it was just a tick in his shoulder, but soon it escalated to jerks of the arms, until finally Akamaru was having almost seizure-like fits. His slit pupils shrunk until only the whites of his eyes were left, and foam bubbled at the corners of his mouth. It all finished when the transformed Nin-ken snapped his head up and let out a guttural roar. The sound reverberated off the walls and shook the arena's occupancy to the bone with the deep levels of sorrow and regret that mixed with the animalistic rage and hatred that came at the forefront of the battle cry. Akamaru's head quickly snapped to the side once his cry was finished, and the Nin-ken's primal eyes glared hatefully at their target Sasuke. The last Uchiha had been the one Akamaru was supposed to hit, and because the raven-haired genin moved out of the way, Kiba got hurt, meaning in Akamaru's instinct-driven mind that what happened to his partner was Sasuke's fault. And for that he must pay. For Sasuke it was a surprise, Akamaru's power had just doubled. The feral Nin-ken's body was wrapped in a fiery cloak of chakra, and the air seemed to be thick with the dog's protective instinct. The combination made it hard to breathe. It made it hard to react. And that's why when Akamaru dashed towards him, Sasuke wasn't able to duck away from the swipe aimed at his face. Blood spattered the floor, and Sasuke stumbled backwards in an attempt to stay out of Akamaru's reach while his hand clawed tightly at his face. At his eye. Blood oozed thickly from the wounded optic organ, it coated Sasuke's face as well as his hand. On Akamaru's end he just stood there with a satisfied look etched across his face, bloody claws raised high with pride. XXX. Up in the stands though, the only emotions being felt were disbelief and anger. Kakashi in particular was glaring hard at Kurena, his fellow Jonin at least having the decency to look ashamed as he berated her. What was that just now, Kurena? What is that pill your student and his pet just took? Because whatever it is, if it causes them to lose all sense of reason, I don't see how you could allow them to use it against a fellow leaf ninja. I don't actually know, Kakashi, the Gensu mistress answered back quietly. It's an Inuzuka secret, so Kiba wasn't allowed to tell me. All I was allowed to know was that it amplified the user's chakra senses and physical ability by at least twice that of a normal food pill. Kurena ducked her head in shame as she then went on to explain how she'd allowed the two to bring them into the test to help ensure they passed. Without knowing the side effects, Kakashi finished sternly. That was very irresponsible of you, especially as a Jounin, and could even be seen as petty by some of your peers. You do understand that, don't you? The red-eyed beauty shot her head up at that. But I didn't know. What was I supposed to do? Tell Kiba that if he couldn't give you a better explanation, then his pill could only be used out in the field against enemy ninja. The Chunin exams are meant to inspire friendship and build relationships, not tear them apart and start civil wars. That's a bit harsh, don't you think, Kakashi? Asuma jumped in to defend Kurena. But he shrunk back a little when the silver-haired ex-Ambi captain turned his lone eye on him. No, Asuma, I don't, because of her pride and her desire to prove herself as the rookie Jounin. Kurena has cost this village one of its last remaining Sharingan, something I know many citizens won't be happy with and the other nations may take as a sign we're losing control of our forces. This was a very bone-headed mistake, one that can't just be fixed by an I'm sorry. But I don't understand, why did it happen? Kurena went on to ask. Akamaru has never acted so viciously before. Not even when Kiba was harmed during practice. So why now? This time it was Guy who threw in his 2 cents. It must be an ingredient they use in their food pill. We saw how it enhanced Kiba's dog-like traits, turning him into some sort of werewolf. If it does something like that to a young genin with human genetics, just imagine what it does to a ninja dog, bred from wolves with no human gene. It would regress the Nin-ken's mind to run purely on instinct. Meaning the only one he'd listen to was the pack leader, who in this case was Kiba. And if something were to happen to that leader, Akamaru wouldn't know what to do. All sense of rationalizing has already been diminished, so whatever was left would be overloaded by pure instinct, Asuma continued. An instinct to make Kiba's attacker pay. An instinct to kill Sasuke, Kakashi finished ominously. His lone eye was now staring down at the arena, drawing his fellow Jounin's gaze as well. XXX. Back down below, Akamaru was gearing up for another assault on Sasuke, his blood-soaked hand reared back and ready for another swipe at the boy's face. But when he launched himself at the injured Uchiha, the transformed K9 was in for a surprise when Sasuke caught his wrist with his free hand. And try as he might, Kiba's animal partner was unable to wrench his hand free. Instead he dropped to a knee when Sasuke put pressure on the bone filling the arena with the sound of breaking bone. Rhea! Akamaru roared in pain. One eye was closed shut in pain, but when he turned the other one up to glare at Sasuke, the feral ninja dog was left shaking as his rage was overshadowed by fear. With one hand covering his right eye, Sasuke stared down at Akamaru with just the Sharingan in his left, and what the dog found there frightened him to the bone. It was dark and cold and spoke of an unprecedented level of madness that one usually only found in the most battle-hardened shinobi. It was Sasuke's words that clinched it for Akamaru and let him know what came next was going to hurt. "You're going to pay for this," he whispered with an icy calm, "with your life." Throwing the damaged wrist to the side, Sasuke finally let his other hand pull away from his eye, which he then used to grip the side of Akamaru's head and cram it into the floor. The impact point exploded, leaving a permanent dent in the tile as spider web cracks funneled out from underneath Akamaru's bleeding skull. But Sasuke wasn't done yet. He changed his grip to take hold of the transformed dog's jacket collar, lifting the bloody Nin-ken onto shaky feet. "This is it," Sasuke told him before burying a fist into his gut. The Uchiha followed it with another, and third, before sending Akamaru into the air with a flip kick. Sasuke wasn't far behind, launching himself not long after. Angling himself in mid-air, Sasuke grabbed Akamaru's ankles and flipped the transformed dog over. Then, locking his legs around his opponent's torso with his arms holding the ninja dog's legs, Sasuke called out his technique, Uchiha clan's secret technique, Falcon Drop. Akamaru no. Kiba had managed to recover enough from being railroaded by Akamaru so that he was able to push himself off the ground on trembling arms and see his partner be sent soaring into the air. From there the Inuzuka watched as Sasuke wrapped around Akamaru like a constrictor snake and pulled the transformed dog down like a stone weight. What's that jerk thinking? Doesn't he know that from that height and angle he'll kill Akamaru? With his adrenaline pumping, flooding his system with another dose of the food pill, Kiba was able to scramble to his feet and rush towards where he knew the two would land. He had to make it, he had to save his partner, he had to. Boom! The crash reverberated off the walls like a thunderclap. Sasuke had pulled away at the last possible moment and used his push-off to further accelerate the Nin-ken's descent. Kiba was blown back by the force of the crash and sent rolling across the arena floor a second time. But when he finally managed to stop himself, the Inuzuka snapped his head up and began to claw across the floor towards the crash site. His frantic efforts were ground to a halt though when as he arrived, the dust cleared away enough so that everyone could see the body that lay on the destroyed tile. The impact must have cancelled the transformation, because what greeted Kiba's eyes was the broken body of Akamaru's original dog form. One whose neck was broken. The pup's spine had snapped apart and both ends had forced their way out through the small dog's neck, staining Akamaru's once pristine coat a dirty crimson. Slit eyes looked on in horror and disbelief at what lay before them. This couldn't be happening, not to Akamaru, not to his best friend. At first Kiba couldn't feel anything, his entire body had gone numb. And then it was like he was on fire. It was instant. The rush of heat erupted from the pit of Kiba's stomach and flooded the Inuzuka's body. The fire was so hot that Kiba was left to claw at his jacket, in a crazed attempt to alleviate some of the feeling. Once the hoodie was in shreds, all eyes that watched the scene could see Kiba's muscles spasm under his skin, breaking down and repairing themselves to increase the young Jonin's strength. Like with Akamaru before him, Kiba's mouth was quickly filled with foam as he thrashed around on the arena floor. He slammed his fists into the tiles, leaving bloody holes in the ground, as he howled out in a pained sort of rage. It finally stopped when Kiba's enhanced hearing caught the sound of Sasuke's voice, the voice of the one who'd killed his partner. "Feh, look at that, the Inuzuka clan heir turns out to be nothing more than a primitive beast. Is it really a wonder why no other village wanted your people, a clan of animals not warriors?" Hearing the insult to his pack, added to Sasuke's murder of Akamaru, sent Kiba farther into the depths of his feral rage. He turned to look at the Uchiha Avenger and revealed to his fellow genin that his pupils had vanished. You. Sasuke was hit with a third attack of nausea, and this time he had a better understanding of what was happening. So when he saw the ghostly image of Kiba rush him with a feint, the Uchiha was ready to lean back out of the way of the real attack that came moments later. The feint was meant to cover a roundhouse which Sasuke ducked under and countered with a palm to the gut. Sending Kiba back a few feet gave Sasuke time to reach into his hip pouch and grip the ninja wire he found there. I'm seeing his next move before he even makes it, like quick view of the future. This is amazing. I've never heard of the Sharingan doing anything like this before, but if it helps me win this fight I won't question it. That turned out to be a good idea because it gave Sasuke enough time to pay attention to what was coming next. Kiba came torpedoing towards him, but Sasuke flipped to the side and avoided him. Then when his lone eye showed him Kiba's next move, the Avenger twisted his body and flipped over the shot to his back as the Inuzuka repositioned himself. And that's when Sasuke's plan came to fruition. He yanked hard, and the ninja wire he'd wrapped around his opponent pulled taut, canceling out Kiba's attack and dropping him to the floor. Once his sandal-clad feet hit the ground though, Sasuke continued with his attack. Tensing his muscles, Sasuke pulled on the wires that kept Kiba bound, and began to pull as he spun on the ball of his foot. Soon enough the force had Kiba being swung around like a sack of potatoes. Sasuke did this for a few rounds before letting go and launching the captured Inuzuka skyward. Like with Akamaru, the last Uchiha followed his prey, but unlike before, he got there too late. Kiba had been thrashing about since the moment of his capture, and had finally managed to break apart the wire that constricted him. So when Sasuke matched heights with Kiba, the feral genin actually caught him off guard with a sucker punch to the face. Then, while the raven-haired Uchiha was stunned, Kiba grabbed a fistful of those black locks and kept his head straight for a headbutt. The crack wasn't anything like when Akamaru impacted the arena floor, but the damage done helped to throw Sasuke even further off his game. Kiba took advantage of that by wrapping Sasuke's neck in the crook of his elbow and squeezing down hard on the young fighter's windpipe. You're going to pay for what you did to Akamaru, you trash. The Inuzuka air seethed in Sasuke's ear as gravity began to take hold of them again. I'm going to send you out just like you did him and rid the world of that stupid eye of yours. Good riddance to the Uchiha clan. Sasuke struggled hard as he listened to Kiba's plan to kill him. He couldn't afford to die, not here. Not when his family's legacy needed him, not while his brother was still out there needing to pay for his crimes. No. Sasuke wouldn't allow his journey to stop here, not at the hands of someone as weak as Kiba. That's what you think. The battered Uchiha shouted back before slamming his elbow deep into Kiba's gut not once, but 3 times. The force of each blow weakened the other boy's hold until finally, he had no choice but to let go and give Sasuke his freedom. Seeing that they were only halfway to the ground, Sasuke decided to use that to his advantage. Flipping his body, the young Sharingan wielder landed a devastating kick to Kiba's stomach, which sent the animalistic air hurtling the rest of the way down and crashing right beside his fallen partner. Sasuke let himself descend slowly after that, and by the time he'd reached the ground the dust had cleared, and he was able to see Kiba. The Inuzuka heir wasn't dead, but he was unconscious and he seemed to have hit his head because there was a growing pool of blood seeping out from beneath his hooded head. Medical ninja came rushing out from the double doors as Hayate declared Sasuke the winner. But, with everything that had just happened and all that had been lost, was it really a victory? The matches came after were ignored by many of the konoha Jonin as they either didn't have to do with one of their students, or it was one that ended too quickly to take notice of. Like Shikamaru's victory over Kintsugi of Odo, or Sakura and Ino's cat fight that ended in a double knockout. And while these matches were going on, many of the Leaf's adults were trying to figure out what was going to happen next concerning both Kiba and Sasuke. Kakashi, your student just killed a fellow Leaf ninja. Kurena argued that kid needs a serious mental evaluation if he's just going to fly off the handle like that. While I do feel for your team's loss, Kurena, you need to understand something. Akamaru had no ninja ID. He wasn't considered a shinobi, he was a tool just like a kunai or a shuriken. Lust like those pills they both took against Sasuke. The Jounin in question answered back harshly. It was true, He did feel bad that his student had killed the Ninken, but the dog was out of control, and Sasuke was technically defending himself. Then what about what he did to Kiba? Sasuke could have very well killed him with that last move. I know you saw the blood. Kurena threw back as a rebuttal. But Kakashi would not allow his student to take the fall for the match's outcome. Unfortunately for you, Kurena, that's part of the rules, and he would have been well within his rights to since Hinata didn't call the match. These are the Chunin exams. Death is inevitable, even among our own ranks, no matter the age. And if you can't get on board with that, then maybe you aren't ready to be a Jonin instructor yet. This got the red-eyed beauty's anger to boil, but before she could say anything, Anko came up and pulled on the raven-haired woman's arm to drag her away. Come on, Kurena, you need to settle down before you start any real trouble. Look, you can go check on the kid and I'll let you know if either of your other students' names get called, okay? Yash. Then you'll not want her to go just yet, because another of young students has been chosen to do battle with my own. Guy hollered with enthusiasm. All eyes turned to the selection board and, sure enough, Shino's name was shown in bright yellow letters across the board. And his opponent TenTen. Chapter .6 - Preliminaries Part 2. All's well that ends well. Sort of. Seeing her name pop up on the screen excited TenTen, it was her time to shine. Her chance to show a little bit of what it means to be a real kunoichi. And not a wannabe like those two poor excuses that ended their fight in a draw, she thought harshly as the bun-haired girl made her way down the steps and onto the arena. Her opponent wasn't far behind either, and soon enough TenTen found herself staring into the blank sunglass stare of Shino Ibarame. She bowed in respect. I hope we can have a great match, the weapon mistress said as she came back up. Then TenTen smirked. After all, we wouldn't want to bore everybody with a short match, right? For a moment Shino didn't speak, and TenTen thought the boy was either mute or arrogant. But then the lanky teen's voice reached the brunette's ears as he said, "It'll only be short if you can't keep up with my bugs." The confidence in her opponent's voice put TenTen on edge a little. What could the clan heir have planned? I can't be sure, but there's no way I'm gonna just sit back and wait for him to get it started, so I guess it's best I make the first move. The brunette figured as she pulled out a scroll from her hip pouch. An explosion of smoke revealed that it stored a pair of kali sticks. Crouching low, TenTen settled herself into a basic stance before pushing off with her lead foot and rushing at Shino. Her time training under Konoha's fastest shinobi made it so TenTen closed the gap between herself and her opponent quickly. This also meant the Ibarame heir was forced to defend himself sooner than he'd expected. TenTen opened with a sweep at the taller boy's legs, but as Shino soon realized, this was a ploy. The brunette had done this as a feint. Instead of continuing the move, she spun around the lanky Jonin and landed a strong blow to the back of his left knee. This move caused Shino to buckle, which opened his defense up and allowed TenTen the opportunity to swing back around and drive her elbow into his stomach. The ever-stoic Ibarame let out only the most necessary of a grunt in pain from the follow-up as he staggered backwards in an attempt to put space between himself and the weapon mistress before him. TenTen saw right through this immediately, and moved fast to close what little space had been created. Unfortunately for her, those few precious seconds were all Shino needed to put up his defenses. Or rather, for his defenses to find their way out into the arena. Because as TenTen lashed out with her kali sticks, she was surprised, and a little grossed out to find that her attack was deflected by a swarm of bugs. It happened so fast, the brunette kunoichi almost couldn't believe it. In a matter of mere seconds, her opponent's high-collared form was shrouded by a heavy fog of black, a wall of insects. And they had all come from the boy's pores. TenTen was about to try another offensive move when a mass of bugs from the center of the wall converged to form a spear. TenTen narrowly ducked her head to the side and avoided it before she leapt back out of the wall's reach. This proved effect as Shino's little friends didn't try to follow her, giving the young girl a chance to think of what to do next. If I try for a rear assault, there's pretty good chance more of his bugs will just show up and block that way off too. Same thing goes for the sides. Which means I have to find a way around them before he wraps himself in a shield of those little weirdos. The question is how. These were the paths of TenTen's thoughts, But as she'd never actually done battle with a member of the Ibarame clan, the brunette didn't really have anything to go on. Something her opponent took quick notice of and decided to take advantage of. With the wave of his hand, Shino motioned for a clump of his wall to detach itself and move its way over towards TenTen. As it moved, the mass of bugs then took an unspoken command and split into two. From there, the two halves torpedoed their way to TenTen. Thinking quickly, TenTen struck her sword into the ground and used it to push off and leap into the air. Once there, she produced another scroll, and after unraveling this one, sent a hail of kunai and shuriken raining down on Shino. As predicted, an even larger swarm of bugs found its way out from under his long coat and helped to create a dense bubble around their host. And that's when she saw it, her opponent's weakness. While yes, the brunette's barrage had been deflected and Shino left unscathed, there was a litter of dead bugs now surrounding the Ibarame's sandal-clad feet. TenTen hadn't noticed this before because she hadn't done enough damage to the wall with her sword strikes, but now, it was clear to everyone that Shino avoided damage at the cost of his hive. And last I checked, no insect hive is infinite. If I can keep this up, he'll be forced to either fight me or give up. What? The bun-haired girl's thoughts were interrupted by a painful impact against her back. That's when she recalled the two insect torpedoes she'd been avoiding. After the hit, TenTen found herself dropping from mid-air like a dead fly, but halfway to the ground she recovered and was able to land on her feet. From there, the weapon-wielding kunoichi backflipped to avoid being on the receiving end of another bug bashing. With these things following my every move, though, there's no way I'll be able to pull off breaking down his defenses without taking too many hits myself, TenTen muttered to herself. Guess I'll have to use that technique. Once she managed to avoid another hit from Shino's bug tornadoes, TenTen went about ending their match. She made a mad dash for her still grounded sword and once again used it as a stepping stool to get her more air. This would need a higher altitude than last time if she wanted it to be effective though, so the bun-haired girl added chakra to her legs to help boost herself even higher. After getting into the air, TenTen pulled out two more scrolls, and with a twist she unraveled them and called out weapon user's secret technique, hardware hailstorm. If the onlookers up in the stands thought TenTen's last attack was a lot of steel, then what came next was beyond anything they had expected. Weapons of all shapes and sizes came pouring out of those two scrolls. Everything from swords to arrows hurtled towards the ground. Towards Shino and his bugs. The Ibarame's form was lost in the glittering sea of metal and TenTen's chocolate brown eyes quickly lost sight of him. This lasted for a minute longer before the rainstorm of weapons stopped and revealed what was left behind. Bugs. There was nothing but dead insects scattered across the arena floor and TenTen's weapons buried in the cement. But there was no Shino. TenTen, who had finally touched back down to the ground, had her head on a swivel looking left and right for her opponent. Where'd he go? I'm right here. That was the only warning the brunette got before hands reached out from the earth and grabbed her ankles. Quick thinking allowed TenTen to substitute with one of her many weapons that littered the arena and escape, but from her new position she watched as Shino uprooted himself from the floor and stood before her. He was a little dirty, but other than that there was no evidence that any of TenTen's weapons hit their mark. Shino must have understood her curiosity because he went on to explain that he had seen her attack coming and used his earth element to escape by using Phi Head Hunter Jutsu. But I do have to give you credit for thinking up that plan. Not many would think to attempt forcing an Ibarame to use their entire colony for a defense maneuver. Unfortunately, your eyes gave you away, and now I'm sure you've used up all of your storm scrolls. Yeah, and so what, I can still beat you. Perhaps, Shino agreed, but can you do it before my friends overpower you and drain every drop of chakra from your system? TenTen followed the boy's finger and watched as a virtual army of insects crawled toward her from behind. She was caught in a pincer move. But then before the bun-haired kunoichi could wonder where they came from, those same eyes Shino had mentioned giving her away earlier caught sight of something. A hole about the size of a bottle cap was carved out of the ground. And that's when she realized it, Shino was defenseless. He'd sent out the rest of his colony while underground and now was trying to bluff his way to victory. She could win. If she got to and put down the Ibarame before his little friends got to her. Chocolate brown eyes looked back and forth as their owner debated on her next decision. Should she do it? Could she do it? I can, TenTen whispered resolutely to herself. I can do this. Grabbing the handle of a sword that was stuck beside her, TenTen pulled it from its earthy sheath and rushed her opponent with a mighty battle cry. As she grew closer and closer to the lanky Abarain though, the bun-haired girl could also hear the remainder of his colony moving in on her rear. This was going to be a close call for sure, but nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? With her developed speed, it didn't take long for TenTen to close the gap again and re-engage Shino in close combat. Opening her attack with a pommel strike aimed at Shino's head, TenTen soon switched it up to using her left elbow in an attempt to strike the boy's collarbone when he ducked under her sword. The second attack hit its mark though, and Shino crumbled down to one knee. Taking advantage, TenTen quickly spun around, slid the blade of her sword so that it was pressed gently to Shino's collared throat. Call off your bugs now, Baraim. I know they're all you have left, so there's none in your body to stop me from pummeling you into the ground. You lose. With his bluff called and no other cards left to play, Shino had no choice but to forfeit his match. With TenTen declared the winner, a crew was brought in to clean up the arena. Both weapons and dead bugs were cleaned up. TenTen made sure to mention to them to keep her weapons all in one place so that she could seal them back up later. From there, she and Shino returned to the risers with the rest of the genin that remained. XXX. Looks like you're down to one, Kirena, Asuma teased the red-eyed beauty. Maybe you should have waited after all. It looks like your team's about to get swept. The Jounin Kunoichi in question glared at the bearded man. Well, look at who they were up against, an unstable Uchiha and a girl with a whole year's worth of experience and training under one of the village's best instructors. Oh, come on, Kirena, don't be like that. There's nobody to blame but yourself. You should have understood that your team just wasn't ready this year. Asuma went on to say. And what about yours? Kirena rebuked. Why'd you decide to enter your team in these exams, Asuma? Because I have experience with training others, and not just from the few genin teams I've had, but also during my time with the guard. I was tasked with training the new recruits for the daimyo's army, so sorry if I feel my students stood a chance here. And then to as insult to injury he said, and let's not forget, one of my genin has already passed the preliminaries. At least I have Hinata, there's still a chance. You two are so sad, Kakashi's voice interrupted them. You both forget that two of my students have passed already? Kirena turned her glare on Kakashi at this point and told him that his student should have been disqualified for his brutality against a fellow leaf shinobi. I mean, how can you stand there and tell me that something shouldn't be done about this? That's not what I was trying to come across as, Kirena, so I will apologize for that. But what you're asking for is a bit extreme. To disqualify someone for excessive force during the Chunin exams is ludicrous. It's like putting a shinobi on trial for murder after he kills an enemy, ridiculous. Well, we'll see what the Hokage has to say about that, because once the preliminaries are over, you and I are going to have a little chat with him about all of this. Alright then, we will, and once the Hokage dismisses your claim, I'd like an apology. While the grown-ups argued over their students, the genin were busy having discussions of their own about what was going on. I still can't believe Sasuke killed Kiba's dog, Choji mumbled behind a mouthful of chips. What's going on inside that head of his to think the Inuzuka clan isn't going to retaliate? Well, that's just it, Cho. I don't think Sasuke was thinking out there. I think the guy was lost in his own emotions about losing his eye and didn't understand the meaning of stop and think. Shikamaru answered his best friend. Both had been forced to choke down their sickness at the sight of Akamaru's mangled and broken body. What do you think will happen to him, Shikamaru? Sasuke, I mean, what do you think the Hokage and Kiba's clan are gonna do with him? I don't know, Choji, but whatever it is, I'm sure glad it's not happening to me. Actually, there's not much the Hokage can do about what happened, Naruto threw in his 2 cents. These matches are actually outside any cage's jurisdiction of power. It helps keep the other villages from feeling like the host could be cheating. But these are shinobi of Lord Sarutobi's own village, surely he can pass judgment in that case. Choji countered. Naruto just shook his blonde head and told the overweight boy that wasn't true. At least, Not until after the exams are over. Otherwise it breaks the agreement that was set up during the creation of these tests, and that's something the old man won't do. No matter what. And are you okay with that? This time it was TenTen's voice that rang in everyone's ears. She had finished climbing the steps and made her way over towards Naruto to see what he thought of her victory, but when she heard what they were all talking about, the bun-haired girl couldn't help wonder about the blonde's personal opinion on the matter. Blue eyes turned to stare into chocolate brown as Naruto gave his answer. Am I okay with someone having to watch their comrades die? No, but I also understand that death is an inevitable part of our profession, and to think that we're going to make it through our whole lives without seeing or causing it is just plain ignorant. For those who knew the old Naruto Uzumaki, this response came as unexpected. Since when had the class clown become a philosopher? But for TenTen the answer was acceptable. So what did you think of my match? Pretty impressive stuff out there, huh? You did well, I'll grant you that much, but it's revealed a major flaw in your abilities, TenTen. With her brow crinkled in confusion, the weapon mistress asked what that could be. You rely too much on your weapons, you didn't use a single jutsu out there, Naruto pointed out. It almost cost you the match. Yeah, TenTen agreed, but I did win, didn't I? What does it matter about almost if I get the victory? Because just how many of those almosts do you think you'll get away with? If you hadn't called Shino's bluff today, it would have been him that was declared the winner and moving on to the finals. What about next time during a mission? What if that next almost comes at the cost of someone's life or a career-ending injury? What will you do then? Do you not think you are being a bit harsh in your response, Naruto Uzumaki? Rock Lee stepped in. He heard the way the blonde was talking to his teammate and didn't appreciate the younger boy's tone. As a matter of fact, Lee, no, I don't. Naruto turned back to TenTen. And I'm not saying it's not great that you won, just that there was ways to make it easier, less risky. You told me your dream, but what good will my part of that do you if you get killed before it happens? TenTen listened to Naruto's words carefully. She realized that he was right. Then you'll teach me, she decided. This threw the young Uzumaki for a loop. What? Don't you already have a sensei though? Why would you need to learn from me? Because my Jonin instructor doesn't work with us on how to perform ninjutsu or genjutsu, he works only in taijutsu. Sure, he teaches us the fundamentals about both and how to counteract them, but not how to do any of them. And besides, you want me to teach you about sealing right. Doesn't this seem like a fair trade to you? Naruto couldn't argue with the kunoichi's logic. And it was better practice for him to teach others what he knew. So, seeing nothing wrong with the arrangement, the blonde nodded in agreement and told TenTen that he accepted the girl's offer. Great. But we'll have to work out the details later, because the next match is starting. The brunette pointed to the board and sure enough, 2 new names had been posted in bright yellow. Hinata Hyuga vs Zaku Ibumi. XXX. Hinata stared fearfully at her own name as it appeared on the selection screen. She had hoped to go last. Her attention was quickly drawn away from that though, and over to the other side of the room when she heard someone laugh hysterically. The culprit turned out to be a young genin from the Sound Village. He had a mop of jet black hair shaped like the end of a broom and was dressed in what looked like hand-me-downs. There was a cream-colored jersey over top a long-sleeved gray shirt. His lower body was covered by a pair of black and white camo pants. Around his neck was more camo, this time in the form of a scarf. I believe that's your opponent, Hinata, Shino pointed out beside her. After his defeat from TenTen, the Ibarame had made his way back over to his teammate. His abilities are unknown, but if his fellow Odo shinobi are any indication, it will have something to do with sound waves. Be careful, Hinata, there's a look in his eye that I find troubling. I'll do my best, Shino, Hinata muttered. She was nervous about facing a foe she knew nothing about, especially one who dealt with something as dangerous as sound waves. But the heiress didn't let her fear stop her from making her way down the steps and onto the arena floor. After all, she had no chance of winning if she didn't at least try. It wasn't long after she'd made her way onto the floor that Hinata was face to face with her opponent, and from the new closeness she could see just how sick and twisted the boy's grin was. It sent shivers through the heiress' petite frame. Weren't smiles supposed to make you want to talk to someone rather than turn and run? And if his twisted visage wasn't bad enough, when Zaku spoke, Hinata likened it to the chattering of a rabid monkey. Ha! Is this supposed to be some kind of joke? I thought this was a tournament for fighters, not a beauty pageant. Can I get a real opponent please, and not a pampered puppy? Through a series of coughs, Hayate explained that Zaku was stuck with Hinata unless she forfeited. Hinata did not. Fine, Zaku spat, if I can't get you to give up, I'll just have to pound you into a pulp. The sound Jonin crouched low in a threatening stance with his hands clawed. I hope you're ready, princess, because I won't be going easy on you. Hinata said nothing, she simply swallowed the lump in her throat and bowed respectfully to her foe before settling into a basic gentle fist stance. Her lavender eyes were soft and held a look of nervousness, but if one looked close they'd see a tinge of determination rimmed around the edges of those pale orbs. She hadn't been forced to face her cousin, or that frighteningly sadistic Jonin with the red hair, so in Hinata's mind she actually had a real shot at winning if she gave it her all. Zaku was one of those few who saw Hinata's determined glint, and it made the Odo ninja annoyed. He'd hoped to scare the girl away, and now that she stood in front of him with that look it only flared his ire. Orochimaru-sama wanted us to keep our abilities a secret as long as possible, Kin, and that loser Dosu already ruined the plan and now I have to throw the plan out the window too, what? While Zaku was deep in his mental rant, Hinata had quickly noticed his lack of focus, and decided to take advantage of it. After all, it's not often your opponent makes such a mistake, and to not capitalize on it would be foolish. So Hinata started the match off with a palm strike aimed at Zaku's sternum, in attempt to end the match as soon as possible. But it seems the girl was too slow, because the sound shinobi returned to the fight just soon enough that he managed to twist away from the deadly strike. Hoping to keep Zaku on the defensive though, Hinata didn't give up and instead placed her weight on the ball of her foot before whipping around with a harsh kick. It found its mark and Zaku was sent rolling back. Not wanting to lose her edge, Hinata charged her downed opponent, only to be sent rocketing back by a fierce blast of compressed air. While Hinata slammed against the tiled floor, Zaku stood tall, recovered from his small bout with misfortune. How'd you like that, princess? Zaku sneered to his downed foe. That's my decapitating sound waves. Packs quite a punch, if I do say so myself. If Hinata heard this, she didn't show it. Instead, the rattled Hyuga heiress stumbled to her feet after pushing up off the floor. Wincing in pain, she patted the area of her hoodie that covered her stomach and found it was tender to the touch. There was definite bruising. I got lucky then, Hinata thought as she kept a close eye on her opponent, because that type of attack could easily break bones or rip me apart if I'm not careful. But now I have a problem. How will I GT close again? Because there was no way Zaku would space out like he had in the beginning of the battle, and that neat little trick he knew would easily keep Hinata as far away as he wanted. I'll have to find a way around it if I want any chance of winning, the Hyuga Kunoichi mumbled quietly to herself. But that's easier said than done, she grunted while dodging a shot from Zaku's hands. While she was in mid-air, Hinata pulled a handful of shuriken from her hip pouch, and sent them soaring in her opponent's direction. But it seems Zaku's technique didn't require any cooldown, because the twisted teen just aimed his palms and deflected the projectiles with another blast. That wasn't good, it meant there was virtually no time in between attacks for Hinata to get closer. She'd have to think of something else. Unfortunately, Zaku didn't feel much like waiting around and was soon sending another powerful blast of compressed air her way. Hinata barrel rolled out of the way, but was hard-pressed to avoid the next attack that came her way, all the while listening as Zaku laughed with malicious delight. Is this the extent of the great Hyuga clan's strength? What good are those fancy eyes of yours if your opponent's too far for you to hit them? Pathetic. As she managed to escape another one of Zaku's destructive blasts, Hinata couldn't help letting his words break through the fragile wall of confidence she'd built before the match. He sounded almost like her father, almost like her cousin, in his harsh words. Her opponent was voicing his displeasure in her performance the same way the heiress' own family would do back home, and it stung terribly. She was trying her best, but even that didn't seem to be enough. It was this spiraling train of thought that caused Hinata to misstep during her next attempt at dodging, stumbling over herself after landing, and then being knocked off her feet by the next attack that came her way. But this one was at least twice as powerful as the first she'd been hit with, and as she landed, Hinata was sure she felt at least 3 of her ribs crack from the impact. Hinata coughed up spatters of blood as she shakily made it to her hands and knees. Her entire body was racked with tremors, as it shook violently from the assault it had just taken. And yet, the Hyuga heiress still managed to find her way to her feet. On shaky knees she activated her Bakugan before falling back into her family's taijutsu stance. Up on the platforms with the spectators, Kurena was watching with rapt attention, as her students signaled she was ready for round 2. "Hinata, please, be careful." Asuma heard the new Jonin's whispered plea and turned a somber eye to her. "Kurena, I hate to say it, but I don't see much of a chance at victory here. Hinata has no sort of distance attacks other than weapons, and we've seen what happened there, which means her only hope is to get in close. But what that sound Jonin can do, I don't see that happening." "So what?" The red-eyed beauty cut harshly as she turned her gaze on the man beside her. "Should I just yell down for my student to give up?" The Hokage's son frowned. "That's not what I'm saying here, but with what I can see of her opponent, that may have to happen soon. And I just want you to realize that, so Hinata doesn't get any more hurt than she already is. We're Ninja Asuma, getting hurt is one of those unavoidable clauses in our contract, and it's something I can see young Hinata needs to learn." Kakashi chimed in with his 2 cents. "Besides, if not for her own shyness, this match would still be in her favor." "What do you mean, Kakashi?" Kurena wondered curiously. Sure, Hinata had a confidence problem, but the new Jounin hadn't seen it cause any problems other than that recent stumble. Before that, her student had been doing fine. Guy noticed the lost look in her eyes and chose to elaborate on what he knew his rival to mean. "Her jacket. It got in the way earlier in the match. If she hadn't been wearing it, young Zaku wouldn't have fully escaped that first palm strike. She would have grazed him just enough to damage his right lung, which would have caused him to stumble and leave him open to more than just that kick she'd thrown. A shame really when one thinks about it. But I've tried to get her top take it off." Kurena cried in frustration. If what was being said was true, then her failure to inspire Hinata was why the girl was losing now. She just won't do it. Probably because she hasn't been shown how much better a shinobi she'd be without it, Kakashi threw in. "I'm sure if you took her aside for some private practice and had her try it, she'd realize the benefits. And that would make her more okay with doing it in public, which I'm guessing is the real problem." "And how can you be so sure?" Kurena questioned sharply. What made Kakashi think he knew the woman's own student better than her? "Because I read her file back when we were asked to pick what squad we wanted to lead, and I also spoke with Urka about each student too." Both explained that Hinata had a desire to prove herself as strong, one that, if approached correctly, would help propel the girl to Chunin in no time with her natural skill and ability to learn quickly through understanding. "I've tried, but she won't listen to me," Kurena argued back. "No matter what I say, she just keeps refusing even when I offer to train her privately." "Maybe because you aren't the one she needs to hear it from," Kakashi surmised, and no one noticed the way his lone eye found its way across the room to one particular blonde swordsman. But that was only for a moment, because commotion down below caught everyone's attention again. Hinata had thrown a smoke bomb to the ground and encased herself in its shroud. XXX. Back down in the arena, Zaku laughed mockingly at the heiress' attempt at cover. "What do you think that'll do for you? I'll just blow it away." But just as he set his hands in motion, the sound ninja noticed that not 1 but 4 Hinatas exploded out from inside the cloud of smoke. 1 went airborne, while 2 rushed out from the side. The last one came from dead center and raced straight for him. The 3 others launched a mini barrage of weapons at Zaku in the hopes to either land a hit or confuse him. Quickly coming to the conclusion that 3 of them were clones, Zaku now just had to figure out which was the real one. Deciding to deal with the weapons first, the youth turned his hands outwards and blasted the 2 at his sides. When she shimmered out of existence, he had his answer. And so, turning his attention to the last 2 kunoichi, he prepared another assault. one hand stretched on front, while the other was aimed high. When the Hinata in the air twisted out of the way, Zaku smirked, only to cry out in pain a moment later when the other Hinata began a furious gentle fist assault on his body. Spectators watched as the Hinata from above exploded in a cloud of smoke. It had been a shadow clone, one with just enough chakra to trick Zaku, but from the looks of a haggard Hinata just enough seemed to mean the rest of her reserves. But it worked, she thought triumphantly as she sent her fingers jabbing into Zaku's arms before making a shot for his chest. Unfortunately, the boy's time under Orochimaru increased his pain tolerance to tremendous heights, allowing him to grit through the pain he felt from those blows and catch Hinata's strike to his chest. From there he pulled her forward, swept her feet out from under her, and buried his other fist deep in her stomach. The exhausted heiress went limp against her opponent, practically leaning on him to support her weight. That clone had been her last chance. All she had left was the energy to survive. Zaku easily took notice of this, grin sadistically. This meant he could have some fun before the match was over. Changing his grip, the sound Jonin wrapped his hand around Hinata's throat before shoving her back. He watched with a disgustingly twisted grin as she stumbled over her own feet before landing on her back. While the heiress gasped for breath, Zaku stalked forward, but refrained from letting loose the entirety of his cruel nature. He didn't need the proctor calling the match after all. Here, let me help you, he taunted as he reached down for the scruff of Hinata's jacket. Lifting the lightweight heiress back to unsteady feet, Zaku teasingly asked if she wished to give up now. Her response was not what he expected. No. I won't quit. I can still win. The girl's persistence had been amusing in the beginning, but now, it just set Zaku on fire with rage. A rage he felt Hinata need to take responsibility for. So, faster than the heiress' weary eyes could follow, Zaku sent his knee slamming into her bruised stomach, and then he watched as the kunoichi dropped to her knees. Coughing up blood, Hinata didn't have much time to register the immense pain radiating from her abdomen because it was soon replaced by a sharper agony coming from her skull. Zaku had taken hold of her hair, and was yanking it back so as to force her to look up at him. Look up at the air cannon aimed directly at her. From this range, he'll blow my head off. Hinata thought in alarm. I'm getting real sick and tired of you, princess, you've lost. Why don't you just accept it? Through trembling lips, Hinata answered him. Because I never give up, not when there's always a way out. And not when the person I admire most is watching me. Well, there's only one way out here, princess, and here it is. Zaku raged. Ninja art, sonic disruption. The amount of blood that washed over the arena floor was staggering, much worse though for Hinata, who was forced to close her eyes so as to not run the risk of catching some disease. Zaku's screams reverberated off the stone walls as he howled in pain, clutching his now useless, bloody stump where a right arm used to be. Gah. What the hell happened? Where's my arm? I may not have had the chakra to use my clan's dojutsu, but I've studied the human body and its secrets my whole life, so it was easy to find which chakra points connected to your devices. That's why you were able to move before, because I didn't waste time going for your muscles, but for your tenketsu. Hearing Hinata's explanation only added fuel to the fire that was Zaku's rage. One that blinded him to reason, and would cost him his other arm after he attempted to blow the heiress away with his remaining cannon. It was after this Zaku quickly went into shock, dropping face first atop the arena floor, and babbling about how it wasn't possible for him to have lost to such a weakling. And the winner is Hinata Hyuga. Hayate announced. Hinata made an attempt to get to her feet, but she was simply too tired from the match, and quickly found herself falling. She was thankfully caught by her sensei, who had seen her struggle and rushed to help. And while the tired heiress wished with all her heart that her savior had been the blonde boy up in the rafters, his nod of a job well done was more than enough to put a smile on her face and lift her spirits. She'd done well in his eyes, and that was better than any victory on the battlefield. There were 2 more matches after hers that involved both of Kabuto's teammates. Choji losing as the other genin had the ability to steal chakra while the other was beaten by Temurai. His ability to stretch like a snake doing nothing against her fierce fan attacks. It was the next 2 names that interested many in the crowd, as it was between Neji Hyuga and Kankuro from Suna. XXX. It didn't take either of the combatants to make their way down to the arena floor, both eager to get this over with. Another Hyuga huh? If you're as lame as that last one, this won't even take a minute. Kankuro boasted. For his part, Neji let loose his own scoff at being compared to Hinata before settling into a more advanced stance of his family's taijutsu, his bloodline activating. I assure you, I'm nothing like that weakling. I am a true Hyuga, a warrior. My eyes are sharper than hers, more deadly in their ability to predict, and they show me that by the end of this match you'll have revealed to us all just how pathetically obsolete your puppetry is in today's age. The Hyuga boy's remarks against his craft started a fire in Kankuro's chest, one that blazed to life behind his beady black eyes, and had him tensing in anticipation for the fight to come. Once Hayate announced the start of the battle, Kankuro was quick to start things off. I'll show you, outdated tough guy, he growled while reaching back and bringing forth his tool. If anything, my craft will overcome the likes of you dojutsu types, and usher in a new era of the shinobi world. Neji's response was just to smirk condescendingly in the Suna boy's direction. Good, he thought, I was right in my assumption, and now that he's running on emotion, the fool won't think to use his head in the fight. As fate predicted, my superior mind will win the day here. The Naruto Prodigy was more than ready for when Kankuro sent his puppet rushing in. He weaved around the serrated blades that posed as claws at the end of the wooden warrior's hand and easily avoided the series of spikes that shot out from its back by ducking low. Channeling his chakra into the tips of his fingers, Neji concentrated and turned it into sharp cones that flared over his digits. Using this trick, the Hyuga boy easily cut the lines of chakra his eyes found connected to the puppet's back. From there it was all about closing the gap between himself and the shocked Suna native. Kankuro tried to avoid the furious fingers that speared into his chakra points, but Neji was just too fast, and in a few short seconds had left the war paint-wearing older boy with no access to his chakra or muscle movement. A clear difference in skill between himself and Hinata, who had battled before. When he was finished, Neji just stood there, tall and proud as his foe slunked down to the arena floor like a lifeless rag doll. Kankuro found he could still move his eyes and looked up at the one who had defeated him, only to shiver at what he saw. Neji's Bakugan was nothing like what he'd seen on the other girl's face. No, his looked fierce and deadly. It was like being a mouse and staring into the hungry gaze of a falcon. It was mind-numbing, it was bone-chilling, it was like Neji could see right through him. Could see everything about Kankuro, even his deepest, darkest secrets and fears. And that frightened the older boy. He'd never faced someone like Neji Hyuga before, and now, he prayed he never did again. All but Kankuro heard Hayate call the match, and the Suna Genin barely registered that medical ninja were taking him away. He was only really aware of the cold feeling of fear as it rushed through his veins. A fear he thought was reserved solely for Gaara. Alright, and now we've come to the conclusion of the preliminaries. There are only 2 challengers left, so would Gaara and Rock Lee please make their way down to the arena? The sickly Jonin called out in a voice mired in coughs. It was time, the final match was about to begin. All who remained in the stands held their breath, as the 2 combatants made their way to the floor. Rock Lee of Konoha against Suna's most dangerous shinobi, Gaara of the desert. The question on everyone's mind wasn't really who would win, but how much torment would each fighter go through before one was crowned victorious. XXX. Naruto stared at the small slip of paper in his hand and the address written on it. After Lee's match with Gaara, the Hokage explained that the remaining Chunin candidates had exactly 1 month to prepare for the final matches, as that's how long it would take all of the attending dignitaries to arrive. He also had them draw lots to see who would face who, and in what order. Naruto was up first against TenTen, while Sasuke was somewhere in the middle set to battle against Gaara. Once the positions were set, both Naruto and TenTen agreed they would put off any form of training together until after the finals, and it was this conversation that sparked the interest of the one who'd given Naruto the paper. They'd caught the blonde before he'd left the tower, and explained that they wished to repay a debt through the offer of training him for the finals, so they handed him the slip before bidding the blonde goodbye. And now here he was standing at the person's door, contemplating if he should knock or not. It was the weight of Kubai Kiriboko on his back, and the dream of honoring Zabuza's memory that convinced Naruto to reach out and let the person know he'd arrived. Besides, with Kakashi-sensei starting Sasuke's training, I'll need someone else to step in and fill that gap. And I guess learning what she knows can't hurt. She's not a Jonin for nothing after all. When the door opened, Naruto looked up and let his ocean blue eyes meet with Anko's own pupil-less brown pair. She had a smirk on her face, like she knew he'd show up, before asking if he was ready to get started. Right now? He questioned. Don't you want to KN out what I've learned so far, so that you can see what to work with me on? Nope, she answered carelessly with a wave of the hand. Besides, if I'm gonna convince the old man to let me take you out of the village for training, the sooner the better. You don't have time to waste on being asked silly questions. Naruto, eyed the older woman curiously as she made her way in the direction of the Hokage's office. Training outside the village? What's out there that we can't do at a training ground? Her next words let Naruto know that the next month was going to be nothing like he'd expected. Well, for starters, you can't come with me on my latest mission if you stay here in the village, kid. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video, as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out the other playlist. Hope you would like them too.